Shut it off and join us for the Pledge of the Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And without objection, we're going to change the agenda just a little bit, so before we have anybody that wants to speak on agenda and non-agenda items, I'm going to ask for our attorney to update us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With regards to item 6A, the Lake Bank Restoration Funding items, those three resolutions, A, B, and C, proposed resolutions 2017-10, 2017-13 to set a public hearing on special assessments, in 2017-14 authorizing the incurrence of indebtedness. Because the materials for those items were not in the online meeting book, the engineer's report, or the March 27th master assessment methodology report, we're requesting that those three items be continued until the April 20th meeting. And at that time, the approach now and the plan would be that at the April 20th meeting, we'd ask the board to consider adopting those after hearing the public comment. Those documents will have all the requisite exhibits as part of the meeting book and posted online so the public and the residents and property owners can all see it well in advance, have a time to digest it, review it, and come in and ask questions or make comments or objections or suggestions. And then right now, the thought might be among the staff that we would request that on April 20th, the board would set the hearing to impose the assessments to be June 8th. And that, again, it's because we don't have, because those reports and those exhibits were not available to the public online for this meeting. We had reports available, the engineer's report for the last meeting, and we had an earlier draft of the assessment methodology, but again, since they were not posted, I think it's in the best interest of the district and the public that those items be continued to April 20th.
There's a lot of confusion going around in the community over this whole situation. First of all, when we borrowed and accepted the SRF loan for $6 million, that $6 million was put into the budget, the principal and interest for that, which was about $360,000. So all of the residents were taxed in this last deal, last tax event, non-ad valorem tax. Their share of that $360,000, which works per the assessment. Now, still some question about it, was it exactly right, but assuming that it was close, it worked out to be about $65 per resident. So I think the residents need to understand that if you can equate, because everybody's asking me questions over there because our lake's being done, is that where is this headed? And I think the best way to describe it is right now we did 5 ponds for $4.4 million. We have 64 ponds to do. Now, they are in different stages of disrepair. We selected the first 13 that were the bad ones. And they're obviously going to have a higher cost to fix because they are in worse condition. But if you would do a projection, and I said this a couple of years ago, you're going to be around 20 million. So if you prorate 6 million, there's going to be 6 millions to make 20. So there could be another 65, another 65, and another 3750 if you want to cut it really close to do all of the work in Gateway. Now that's going to be done over a period of time, primarily because the fact, one, we can design it. Danny's firm's doing a good job of getting the design done. The fact is there just aren't enough contractors and not enough time of the year when the water levels are really down. We're really lucking out this year because the water levels are low and facilitating this. Yeah. But that's a part of the confusion that people think that when they read this that was in the Sun, that there is going to be another assessment. The assessment's already there in there for the first project, but it will have to be increased if we go back and start other projects that take us over $6 million. And we'll certainly go over $6 million in moving to phase 2 and into phase 3. So I think there was a lot of confusion on that we're going to see one heck of a huge increase in our assessments, and that is true in the future. There's no doubt about that. That is going to happen if we fix all these ponds. But it's not gonna happen tomorrow.
So hypothetically, we're saying at some point in time, when we complete all the work, the resident impact will be about $165.
Well, let's
That's
make the
ballpark.
let's make the math easy. If it's 21 million, that would be 3 sixes and a half. So multiply 3.5 times 65, so the residents are gonna be up a little bit over $200 in total additional ad valorem tax when all of the work is done.
It's not
If the
ad-
math is, that's close.
Well, it's not ad valorem, and that's,
Non-ad valorem.
it's debt amortized over 20 years.
Correct. And it's gonna be per year for 20 years, staggered.
Once again, assuming, there's a lot of assumptions, and again,
A lot of
until
assumptions.
until you get the final
But
report.
what they
and the
need to
final debt.
understand is that 190, the statute under which we're operating, and I've been on the phone to Tallahassee, and I'll tell you, I don't know who came up with this 25, 30 years ago, but there wasn't gray matter in the brain. It's only the CDD bill that has this, and the ridiculousness of it is that these federal grants and loans, in this particular case, a low-interest loan, is for 22 year, or 2% for 20 years for a reason. It's to scatter the cost and keep it low to facilitate a public construction. If we fail this bond validation, this is a key thing. If we fail this bond validation, it's no longer a 20-year amortization schedule, it's a 5. So 65 triples overnight.
Well, we won't
So
say-
we do not want to fail. We want to make sure this bond validation goes through to scatter this cost out over a long period of time. So that the existing residents, the fallacy of all this is that the existing residents are here and we would lose the bond validation hearing. The existing residents for the next 5 years pick up the tab, and the guy that moves to Gateway in year 6, he says thank you and sends you all a Christmas card because you paid for it for him.
Yeah. So
So yeah, we want it to be successful and we want it to pass.
we need to clearly articulate to the residents what the current impact is
65.
in layman terms, and what the projected potential cost could be, which potential means probably highly likely, because we will complete the lakes, we just don't know the dollar amount. Because I think when you break it down, Ed, into what the impact is per resident, it's, the house isn't on fire, as much as some residents may perceive.
It could be serious if we lose the bond validation. It could be extremely serious because of the fact that instead of a 20-year principal and interest payment, you're cutting it to a 5-year term, and that cost,
And-
it's a little bit more than triple.
And all of this is the purpose of the town hall.
Well,
The
unfortunately.
June 8th meeting
No,
will be
well-
for us to answer questions like
Yeah,
this, right?
No, the June 8th meeting is to finalize the assessments,
Okay,
is what it is, to hear objections and comments to,
right.
what's going to happen is after April 20th, assuming for sake of discussion that the board adopts the resolution approving the engineer's report and the preliminary assessment report, notices will go out to all the impacted property owners. All of them are listed in this, on the roll that's in the master assessment methodology report. And it will tell them that this is the amount of borrowing, this is the purpose of the borrowing, this is the number, total debt that would be on your property, assuming the entire amount is borrowed. And again, that's the key, is assuming the entire amount is borrowed. And then people can come into the district office or go online and look at the report. And then they will appear on June 8th to provide their comments, objections, or exceptions to that methodology and to the assessment. And the board will sit as a board of equalization and say, okay, you're right, you're only one ERU, you're not 3 ERUs, or you're correct, or decide upon what that number is, and then the board adopts the final assessment roll and the final assessment resolution. And in between that time is when I'd be filing the bond validation, so that as soon as we get that final assessment roll, we can go back into the court and then have the hearing the latter part of June at the latest, hopefully, to be able to validate it. Then there's a 30-day appeal period. Anybody can challenge it, who lives in the district.
Another component of this, when I started talking to the people at FOSD, That's our organization we belong to that are basically special interest districts, of which we're one. The question they raised was, why 12.5? If you have a projection that shows, like my calculation shows, and I think Danny would probably agree, we're up to around 20 million. Why do we want to approve 12.5 and come back and pay all the legal fees again, all the bond counsel fees again, all the engineering fees again, to have another report that takes it from 12.5 to 20? Do it right now, and there is no obligation whatsoever in doing it. It eliminates further expenditure of professional fees 3 years, 4 years down the road of having to do this again. Bite the bullet, put down the 20 right now, and be done with it. There's no harm, no foul.
By way of example, Pelican Marsh or Fiddler's Creek, one of those districts, way back in like 94, 96, their initial validation was for $200 million. They never even came close to
Why not?
touching that, but they validated a huge amount. I was talking to Russ Wire. Russ is the president of the company. He did the assessment methodology, master assessment methodology report. And correct me if I'm wrong when he shows up, but he said that Ave Maria was going to try to validate 3/4 of a billion, almost 750 million.
There's no reason
Will they ever
not to
use
do
it?
it.
But again, what we can do if the board wishes us to, and we've already had preliminary discussions with Russ, Dave Lapidus, the bond counsel, and Russ and I, we've chatted, and Danny, I think, got touch, that if the board wishes, we could have, at the April 20th, have another series of tables, and, I'll call it options, with a higher number, and then Danny's engineer report would obviously need to be adjusted accordingly to account for more
Justify the number.
improvements. That's
Justify
correct.
the number.
And if the board so directs, I'll get with Russ and with Danny, we can do that and have that available so y'all can see, and have that in the packet on the website so everybody can see it ahead of time.
And as long as we're really clear that it's almost like a line of credit. You get approved for X amount, that doesn't mean you're paying on it or that you're ever
That's
gonna
correct.
use it, but it's just easier in the process. I mean, I understand it, and it makes perfect sense to me. I think where our due diligence is gonna be, whether we continue to approve, the ongoing efforts in the restoration, but the logic sounds.
Yeah, and the formal, there's one other component of it, there's a mailed notice that goes out to all the affected property owners, and there's an ad in the newspaper. And the mailed notice is quite extensive, and it's dry, and it can be boring, and also holy moly kind of letter. But there's also in bold print, all caps, it's saying, this is the maximum obligation, depending upon how much debt is issued, et cetera, et cetera. But again, and we've talked about having in the last board meeting too, we've had some conversations about a letter in advance of that, softer letter, saying you'll be getting a legal notice, please pay attention to everything that's in there as your rights, et cetera. But in layman's terms, here's what, here's a lake bank restoration project in layman's terms, without running afoul of what we have to technically send out. So
It's illegal.
we've also talked about that.
Okay.
And one other question, I think you had a couple questions too, you want to wait until we have the hearing to clarify those other two?
Yeah, the other question that I'm hearing in the community is, who pays for this? Well, the issue is, that had this discussion is that Pelican Reserve's community, including Pistoia and Prado, the two newest ones, that are in the district. This gets complicated. They're in the district. They're not in the city of Fort Myers, but for the purposes of the ponds, they are not in the district, so they do not pay.
But they're not in this area for assessment?
They're not in
for
this area for
project.
assessment. The Arborwood Phase 3, which is the one at the end of Gateway Greens Drive, which was removed from Pelican Reserve, that's in, and basically and essentially everything else inside the perimeter of Daniels over to Timber Creek, over up to 82, through Stony Brook and back down, are all in the assessment. That's vacant and platted property. So those are the ones who pay for it.
Except for the schools.
Except for the, don't even get me started on that.
Mrs. Flaherty?
Yeah, the assessment, it's a special assessment, it's a one-time assessment?
No, it's
Okay,
20 years.
That's what people don't understand, and they wanna know how much it's gonna be.
Well,
And
you'll
we
see
don't-
that, yeah, again, the assessment methodology report says, here's the total amount of, assuming you borrow the maximum debt, here's the total amount per ERU. And the program, the concept would be to have that amortized over 20 years. So when you see the report, you'll see that one number. And we levy it one time for the purposes of, this is the amount we levy it. But we're really not imposing or collecting anything until we borrow. Does that make sense?
We just need to break down to, really, what is the impact to residents? How much out of pocket, whether it's annually or per?
Stephen's
monthly or
calculation
quarterly?
was about $65 per year per EAU.
Yeah,
That was-
and I talked to
That
Russ.
was the ballpark.
Yeah, and I talked to Russ Wire about that approach too, that concept when he makes his presentation, to have a handout and have a little sheet saying.
Calculation.
Based upon 20 years, here's what'll,
$5.50 a month.
Well, if, on top of what's there, once again, this is,
Yeah.
so he'll have that also. And,
Well, is now the appropriate time to make a motion to have that 12.5 million changed to, say, 20 million?
I think perhaps the motion might be to authorize preparation of alternative B, I'll call it, of
Okay,
both the
that's
engineer's
fine.
report
Between
and.
options.
I could go with that.
And for both project, for both the assessment and the engineer's report.
The issue we don't have, and I don't want to put Tony in a corner by asking him right now because it's catching cold, is that you're paying engineering fees, you're paying legal fees, and you're paying bond counsel fees, and God only knows what other fees to do this. Why do it twice? It costs you nothing to do it once. I don't like paying fees.
Oh, no, I'm with
But
you.
for 40 years,
Oh, no,
I
we've-
collected 'em,
No,
so-
we've talked about
Yeah,
that internally,
I just-
among the, like Dave Lapidus and I just had a conversation today about that.
But I like
Do you want
Tony's,
that
the
to be a
suggestion.
motion?
Yes,
Or-
please.
okay.
I like your suggestion that it's an alternative.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
I would amend it to be that.
okay.
I would-
Second?
I would second.
Would you repeat the motion, please?
So are you gonna vote on that today?
No, we cannot. Well, we can vote on having the alternative done today, but the presentation still is on the timeline Tony, the attorney, just
April
told us.
20th board
would
meeting is
be
what we got.
April.
And that'll be,
Why should we give you money, something you don't even agree with?
You're not.
Yeah.
What this motion is about is basically, think of it as a line of credit. We have a line of credit for 12 million today, even though we have only projected to use,
Well, we have a line of credit for 4.4 million. We have a loan for up to 6 million, but we have a validation for 0. So we're pushing the validation
to amortize over 20 years.
to amortize it over 20 years.
Yeah.
and if there's a question, if you want to, you can step to the podium instead of speaking from the audience.
Yeah, well, I think.
We're in, may I talk?
Yes, go ahead.
We're investigating, isn't the word, that to.
We're drafting an
Right.
option, an
Alternative.
option B to expand.
Investigate.
Yeah.
to go
No,
up.
no,
So
to prepare,
that's-
To
to
prepare.
prepare an alternative program for validating $25 million in borrowing.
Right.
And again, that would just, and again, the approach would be on April 20th, the board would hold the hearing to decide to adopt an engineer's report for a project the size of which is 12.5 million, or an assessment methodology that goes with that, whatever the cost might be, if it's higher than that because of interest and everything else, and prepare an assessment methodology report for 25 in addition to the one that's already out there. So the board can decide which way they want to proceed for the validation.
The critical thing to remember is if this does not go through and it's turned down, what was a 2% 20-year loan becomes a 2% 5-year loan. 65 becomes in excess of 220.
Yeah, but that's
That's why you don't want to.
Is that kind of a threat?
That's the
That's-
problem.
That's kind of a threat.
We have to avoid.
And let me ask you to tell us your name
Tell
and
the
what
truth.
community you live in, please.
I am Daphne Weber. I live at 12031 Mahogany Isle Lane in Callaway, or Gateway Community.
Thank you.
And I find it difficult to think that the only thing you've heard about this is how we pay for it when so many people are upset that the stones are going into our property. Also, I find it difficult that you want us to say, oh, well, we'll just give you a blank check to pay for 65 ponds to have white stones, when we don't, we want plants and good ecological things happening in our community. This is what kind of happens here. You go ahead and you say, oh, let's do 20 million. It's only going to cost you $220. And then you just make decisions without the rest of us being part of this. And there is a huge group of people, when they find out you're putting stones on 65 ponds, let alone 5, which people are upset about now, then you don't even take that into consideration. And some people on this board don't even think littorals or plants that give off oxygen, that do not, that take in carbon dioxide are important. And while I'm up here, if the board is the one that is putting Clorox on all our gutters to make them wider, that were sprayed as I was walking my dog, and you think that's good for birds and kids and people walking the streets?
Margaret, may I respond?
Before, I just want to say that on April 20th is when everybody will have a chance to provide their feelings on this. So that's why we wanted to let you know that we are continuing.
Mark, you gotta make sure that we have a distinction here. The April 20th is not to discuss the project. It's the methodology of the funding of the project. And
But
to
people have
answer,
a right to
I understand,
speak.
but to answer
But also, we've been
Daphne's,
talking about this
Daphne,
for over a year.
I know.
to answer her question, we created a pond standard. We had it advertised right and left. We had a ponds group. And one of the things that came out of that, after some very contentious meetings, was people in this community made it clear, people in this community that came to the meetings made it clear, they do not want littorals on their residential banks. I can tell you right now, because I live on one where the rock's being added, and everybody up and down the bank along the pond 116 is happy as can be. They would have a, they would have a fit if we were putting in littorals.
Some of your neighbors, and that's not true.
I understand. Anyway, the issue is that we're beyond the littoral issue.
That is not
Madam Chairman, you may want to ask for some order.
If someone wants to speak, I ask you to come back to the April 20th meeting, actually, because that's when we'll have public input on this, because we're moving this to that meeting.
Can you call someone that we brought to give information?
He's already turned in his square.
He's turned
No,
on his.
not on residential,
Okay,
not on residential.
well then let
Only
him
in the
go,
ponds
let
that
him
have
go.
it.
Because he has the information, he has our petitions. Okay.
So we've got a motion on
The
the floor.
the request, the motion to continue item 6A to the April 20th, April
6A,
20th.
B, and C,
A, B, and
correct?
C. Well, it's A. It's 6A, then small a, small b, small c.
Okay.
And continue those to April 20th with a direction to the staff and consultants to prepare alternative engineer report and assessment methodology with a funding amount of 25 million?
20 million.
20 million, okay, 20 million.
That's my motion.
And that's, may I talk?
Yes.
We
That's
cannot
Let's
hear
hold
the
order.
public discussion.
Okay. That's the alternative, so it's not a definite, it's just an alternative.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
So we're only voting so that there is just an alternative available.
For you to review and make a decision.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then this gets moved to the 20th meeting,
All
all
right.
3 of those items.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so this gets moved to the 20th with the second alternative. And so we'll move to public comment now.
First person that we had is Rhonda Brewer from WCI Lennar.
Hello, Board. I just wanted to appear today and first of all, thank you very much for responding to the packages we received, Tony's memo that was posted on the agenda, to the legal conveyance documents that were submitted, and so we appreciate that. And we're in the process of resubmitting to those comments specific to the legal package within the next 2 weeks. I did want to point out, though, that a couple of the comments that were also provided really stepped outside of bounds of what the legal package review is for. And I think there's some confusion as far as what assets go with which assets as part of the review process. For example, I'll give you a for example. If you look in the agenda package, there's item number 2, and it's Matarita Phase 3. So the district attorney lays out the legal review comments A through E, which we have no objection with, and we're responding to those. But down below, there are statements made that are outside his legal purview, where he states, Gateway has not yet accepted Cypress Grove Drive. And Cypress Grove Drive and those improvements aren't associated with Matarita Phase 3. And those type of comments are repeated throughout the remaining submittals. So I thought there might be confusion in which assets go with Cypress Grove Drive, and so I asked the engineer to prepare an exhibit that I'd like to hand out to the board at this time.
For the record, there was no confusion on my part.
Thank you.
And
And we will bring this back up again after we hear the other public comment.
Hey, April, can you turn the volume back down a little bit? There's some,
Yeah, we lost our screens too.
you didn't do anything?
No.
Okay.
We lost our screens too.
Excuse me.
There's nothing on this. Mine
Sure.
isn't turned on. That helps.
So just very quickly here, what you'll see is a color-coded map, and each color is its own distinct package submittal. So, for example, if we started left to right, you'll see like a turquoise area, that's Azura, and you'll see a lime green area, that's Solaro. And in between those, you see Cypress Grove Drive, which is like a dark green. And that Cypress Grove Drive, which is a dark green, it actually coincides with a portion of that phase called Tract L, Phase 1. So each color is its own package, its own submittal. Carina 2, which is a darker green, that is tied to a portion of Cypress Grove Drive, and that's why we have it in green there. So each one of these neighborhoods is a distinct package, and it has its own submittal and should be looked at independently. So I just wanted to make that comment. The second thing I just wanted to discuss is that in Casella 1 and 2, there's been some back and forth about, we've asked Gateway to sign off on the amenity because the city of Fort Myers needs that letter, and there's notes in their email that it's been signed off, but we can't get a letter, so I need some help with that and some direction on that. The district engineer says that the utilities have been accepted for Phase 1 in Casella. The other question that I had is I wanted to get a status update on the Gateway Roads package that we submitted back for legal review on February 7th.
that's not completed yet. It will be by the April 20th. I got a little wrapped up in all this assessment and lake bank restoration, so I apologize for that.
This is a separate issue. This is Gateway Boulevard turnover.
Yes.
So no one said yes.
I thought it was 5 roads. February 7th is not Gateway Boulevard, they're the side streets. Right. Neighborhood streets.
Right, the neighborhood
Not
streets.
Gateway Boulevard, neighborhood streets.
Okay, it's the 5 or 6
Right.
neighborhood
Yeah.
streets.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that'll be April 20th?
Yes, and I'll get a response back to you next week on that, Ronnie.
Okay, thank you. And then also for your information, we did resubmit back Matarita Phase 2A and Solaro, and that was about the end of March, so I wanted to make sure that you,
I don't have that.
I have Matarita 2A.
okay,
I apologize. I have it.
No.
you have that,
You
and
can
you have
always visit
Solaro
too.
too, because they both went in.
Is it the same package?
They're two separate submittals, but they both went in. So,
Margaret, for clarification, can I ask
Okay.
Rhonda a question? I want to make sure I understand it. Rhonda, on, what is the road, the east-west road? Cypress?
yeah, Cypress Grove Drive, and
What?
it's broken up into multiple
Yeah, well,
phases.
that's what I was going to ask you. The colors are hard. it looks like to me that the color of the first section from Pelican Reserve Main Boulevard all the way over to the Second Street going north, which looks like boy, these colors are close, Matarita Phase 4, that all looks like it's one color, kind of a blue. Is that true?
Yes.
And then from that point on, everything is the green Carina color. Is that correct then?
To the yellow.
To the yellow.
This is where the break point is.
Okay,
right there.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's hard to see on this, the colors.
The second S,
Gotcha.
just before the
And
second
then
S.
this blue goes with this Matarita 4, and
Okay.
then this piece goes with Prado.
Got it,
Dark
got it.
blue is track L.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay, okay.
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 The last thing that I just wanted to make sure too, it's very helpful to get the legal review, and I want to make sure that we're also getting Tetra Tech's letters and any punch list, anything outstanding. In the review package, there was a letter in here dated October 13th, and unfortunately, it was copied to the engineer, and I wanted to request, just as a matter of trying to improve process, if Lennar could also be copied on any punch list items or anything like that, so that I can have the ability to follow through and make sure that these issues are getting resolved. Okay. So that's all I had. Thank you.
We'll have further discussion on this when we get to it on the agenda. Who else was wanting to speak?
David Caldwell with WCI Lennar.
Do you want to wait for it to?
For the agenda item, if they had questions.
Okay, thank you, David.
We have Mr. Bob Marquez of Villa Grande, Unit 122, 1122. And he had 3 different issues he'd like to discuss.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Bob Markey and I live at Royal Greens at Gateway. We're a condo community, but somehow over the years it's still perceived as an apartment complex. I've been here 4 different years, coming to this meeting just on some basic issues of safety, as well as ways of improving Gateway itself. My wife and I bought here, I think it's been 6 years now, and even though the issues I'm bringing up are not on what you've been talking about, they're still very important to those of us and how we're affected. First of all, crosswalks crossing the Gateway Boulevard. I brought that up in the past, and I know the developer was still working on those issues, and once it gets turned back into the county, then I guess we'll be able to do something about it. And one of the reasons that we can still get away with not having crosswalks going across the boulevard, the Gateway Boulevard, is to, I'm sorry, is it Gateway Boulevard, the road?
You're
Okay.
right.
Going across Gateway Boulevard is because there's not sidewalks on both sides.
That's correct.
But just on my way over here tonight, for example, there were 3 high school kids that were crossing the road to go to the Quick Pick, the new store. And there was a car speeding by, and quite a few actually, and one of them, just laid on the horn at those kids. And it's not their fault, they just wanted to go across the street. It's really a safety issue that I brought to the attention 4 times now, and I'm just hoping that eventually something is done for the safety of it. And I brought up in the past where I've seen a mother with a stroller and holding on to the hand of a little one and trying to cross the road. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. Garbage along the Boulevard Road. The trucks that are going by are just losing whatever, and I'm going to give that as credit for why it's happening. But there's paper towels as well as Will any of the, you can tell what's being sold as far as Subway sandwiches or anything else. You know, we go along and pick it up with our little tweezers, and we bring a garbage bag. You know, there are some people, I guess, that is working on it with the golf cart, but they don't go into the bushes. They just, if it's there on the golf cart, they'll reach over and get it. But that's as far as they go. Inappropriate drainage in front of our community at Royal Greens. There's a swale, I guess, is what they call it, but my wife and I walk the road most every morning with other members that live there. And we don't see the drainage problem that we have in front of our community. If any of you wanted to take a ride over in front of our community right now, the trees drop the leaves. Right now, there's probably an inch of leaves all under all those trees. The grass is dead. They're not being watered, but even if it were being watered, it wouldn't be able to breathe because the leaves need to get out of there. But, you know, and you can see on the inside of the sidewalk where it's our property, it's green. The outside, it's dead. And then I came here with the concern of our water bill and sewer bill increased. And all of this seems to have gone upon, all due respect, deaf ears, because nothing's been done. I have brought these issues up, and it's just frustrating. Today, I'm coming with another issue, and I think I could probably say, here's an opportunity for you guys to make a little bit of money. And that is in Royal Greens. And some of you people living in your communities are probably going to not be aware of this, but I went to Heather Fitzenhagen, one of our representatives, state representatives, and this is a common problem throughout Florida, is that big money has taken over many communities. Royal Greens is one, where you have investors that have come in and bought up large blocks of property, and whether it's a condo community or a housing community, and you lose your identity because every one of those community, if they buy one unit or one house, they get one vote. But some of them, we have an individual that has 35 plus units. He has 35 plus votes, and anything we vote on, we're already outgunned. And so and then you have other individuals that have 5 blocks, 10 blocks, and some of them, what they'll do is they just simply won't take part in the vote, and you need to have a certain amount for it to pass. And so we're just not being able to move on. As a residential community, I think shame on them, and what can we do? I'm sorry, but I'm kind of tired of being told what we can't do, or, you know, it's legal, because what's legal isn't always right. It's not right that we as a residential community are paying HOA fees and we're subsidizing these people that are coming in. And in my opinion, I couldn't start a commercial business in my community. I think that's a commercial business. They should be taxed higher. Are they being taxed higher than I am? I don't think so. So it's something that has legs, and it needs to be addressed throughout the state of Florida. It's not just Royal Greens, it's not just it's not just Gateway. It's a common problem that I think our lawyers, need to find a way to represent residents and residential property, and we need to be identified different than apartment complexes. If we're an apartment complex, then that's the way it is. But we're not. But lo and behold, when the whole thing started out, there was a developer, and they were referred to as apartments. Well, I'll be darned if we still have, as simple as this sounds, we still have the federal post office delivering our mail as apartments. And if you put units, they won't recognize you. I don't live in an apartment. I live in a unit. Is there something that we can do to be recognized as units and individual units, because we certainly are paying the price as residents to be recognized as such.
I think as far as the apartment versus unit, that might be something that you'd like to take up with the Postal Service. But this sounds like you're not gonna, this won't make you feel better, but this sounds like it's an HOA issue, not a CDD issue. I don't know that there's anything this body
Well,
can do to help you.
Margaret, it's a condo issue, not an HOA
Okay.
issue. And
It's a
are you a member of the condo association?
Yes,
And do you have a property manager
yes,
and an attorney?
yes.
Okay. I would assume that they have advised you, I've got history on this. I've assumed that they have advised you that if you want to do some of the things you're wanting to do, you have to have a declaration or covenants change. And you can do that, but I'm sure that there is a requirement or a stipulation that you have to get 2/3 or more of the residents to go along and agree with that. Now, if a developer and/or an investor has come in and bought up and has a majority interest, then you probably might have a problem in getting anything passed that's going to be negative to them. But as long as you're under what I'm going to guess is 2/3, that would be the route I would go, is to address that issue.
Well,
Because
I-
that
I-
doesn't have anything to do with us whatsoever.
Nothing at all.
No.
Okay, any of the other issues I
Yes,
mentioned?
Yes, I was going to report on one. I was working on and was a part of the Gateway Roads turnover project. And one of the issues we discovered right off the bat was the very problem that you're talking about, and that is access across Gateway Boulevard. The problem we ran into with the county and the county engineering staff when we were doing it was categorically, you cannot put a crosswalk from a sidewalk, and as you know, the sidewalk's on the west side of Gateway Boulevard, in that location. You cannot run a sidewalk, or, I'm sorry, cross-hatching over to the other side if it does not terminate in a sidewalk. In other words, right now, like Brown Academy, there was a big push at Brown Academy, right there by the Gateway Boulevard Deli. They wanted a crossover right there, which would have facilitated somewhat access to the subway into the little mini mart. But the problem was, there was no sidewalk on the side to terminate. The county just said, absolutely not. The only way this could be done, and now it's going to get complicated because the road's been turned over to the county, would be to come back in, petition the county to get them to install sidewalks in segments of where that commercial property is on the east side. For example, it'd be nice to have a sidewalk that would be along the front of the Gateway Boulevard Deli area, then cross over and go along the front of that subway and the little mini mart. Then we could be able to put one and/or two crossings over. But at this point in time, they made it perfectly clear to us when we were doing the plans, and in fact, the engineers, we talked about it. Absolutely, they were not going to allow us to put crosswalks in. Because what we could be doing is sending people over into the only logical places to send them is one, to the grass, or two, send them right into a street right away. And the last thing we wanted to do, and the county wanted, is to have a crosswalk terminating on the street, or in a street. So that's the problem, we ran into that. Trash along Gateway Boulevard, that's another one we argued, and a lot of that is caused by the fact that the drainage of the Ray Gateway was originally designed, rather than putting in storm sewers, inlets, and curbs, we went with a swale approach. And over 25, 30 years, a lot of those swales have filled up. We tried to correct most of those, and there was two responsible entities. WCI had about 75% of the roads, Gateway, CDD had the other 25%. We tried to address those issues as a part of the design, as a part of the turnover. We did it to the extent necessary to get and the approval of Lee County DOT, and that's about where it ended. Did it solve the problem? Probably not, because the fact that those swales on your side of the road are very, very shallow slope, very little slope, and the water sets in them a long time. It creates a problem for our CDD in sending the landscapers out there in the wet season. They bury to the axle because it's so wet. But
Well-
there's just not much we can do about it right now. The true answer would have been to put curbs in the road, but that would have cost a mint, and nobody
As
wanted
dry
to
as
do
it is right now, they're still sinking.
Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me.
So, and that's during the dry season.
Yeah, now the leaves and trash, now that's a difference, especially trash. I don't know how many times I go up and down Gateway Boulevard, and I don't care, I'm not gonna select trucks as singling them out. I'll pass it to everything that's got 4 wheels or more. Comes flying out the window. I don't know I was the president of the Gateway Greens HOA, and we have a wall that's about 3,000 feet long. I don't know how many times we have to go out and pick trash out, but we have people that they don't care. They just wing it. Now, I think that we should be able to maybe do something is to try to figure out, at least on HOA, well, it's not our property anymore, but we do have some responsibility. We have the street lights, we have the landscaping, and to me, landscaping would be inclusive of making sure there's not trash in landscaping, that perhaps we can come up with a plan of how we send our gator out to have people pick the stuff up and be a little bit better at maintaining our right-of-way. Now, once it goes past our right-of-way, which is everything inside the sidewalk, that's ours. If it's over on your fence line, as you know, that would be yours. But maybe that's something that we want to talk about, and it's a staff issue. How many man-hours does it take to do all that?
Well, and I would say that I'm sure there's organizations that we could probably partner with to adopt that street, or to do something where there's some regular volunteers out there to pick up trash. I think there's some solutions there. We just need to work through them.
But the
As far
crosswalks,
as-
I'm sorry, I don't think there's a way that we can touch that unless and until somebody goes to the county and asks them to put in sidewalks on the other side of the street. And the issues with, that Heather brought up to you, those are totally condo association, and you're governed by a Florida statute on it. And boy, it's very specific that they'll tell you, you go back to your bylaws, articles, and your covenants and see what they say that you can or can't do. As far as the water and sewer, we get our water and sewer from Lee County. Every year, they pass down an increase to us, and we pass it on. And it's pretty much that simple.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, and I realize that we have to make decisions sometimes. Even though I respectfully disagree with some of them, I just think that I don't think anyone owns a rake down here. I don't understand why people don't collect the leaves. They just mow and blow, and they blow it to one side of the sidewalk to the other. It's ridiculous, and they don't go anyplace. So, that being said, I do think there is a few things that could be done, but again, it's not a high priority, so.
Who is your property manager?
Right now, it's KW.
KW.
KW, I'm trying to think what, I'm really not sure their official title, but they're
And do you know your attorney?
Yes, it's John Godey.
Oh, with Godey, DeBost, Damskick and Boast?
Yes.
Okay, they're ours, or what was ours, was
Yeah.
mine. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
they're-
good, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they're good. I just don't understand why things aren't being done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have other speakers?
Yes, the next speaker is Serge Thomas. He's representing Dr. Greg Trolley at FGCU, and he wants to talk about littoral planting.
Hello, everybody. So, yeah, my name is Serge Thomas, for the record. I'm a professor at Florida Gulf Coast University, and I've been working with ponds since 2005, so quite a long time. For ponds that really are closer to you guys and managed the same way would be Pelican Landing. So actually did an evaluation for these ponds on 96 of their ponds. And basically my role was just to give ecological opinion about the way these ponds are being managed and if they're healthy or not healthy. So I think I have the knowledge and background, and also I've done a lot of remediation for ponds to ask you a few questions. So I'm here representing Greg Tolley, who wants to advocate, along with a lot of other people, against a riprap, which are, stones going to be put around your lakes. As an ecologist, I'm not an environmentalist or an advocate, so I'm just going to relate to facts, and you guys will make the decision in the end, because I'm not living here, I'm just representing, okay? So, how many of you know here what these ponds are supposed to be doing, including the CDD here?
We're very familiar.
Okay, so just to remind you, ponds, by mandate in 1982, they were mandated to be used as a first line of defense of pollution, so that all the water that will collect from the lawns, the roads, everything, the trash, we mentioned the trash, the leaf litter, would eventually collect into the pond and the pond is supposed to clean that water before it's being released either to the groundwater or to the surface water down to the bay. All right, so protection. It's a green technology to clean water. Okay. So everything that you do for the pond, whether you maintain it well or not, and that's debatable, will affect the pond some way in the functioning. So to come back to the riprap, so the riprap is one way to prevent erosion, okay? It also prevents to some extent from the nutrient from actually getting into the water because you will grow algae on these rocks when they're going to be submerged. You'll be growing bacteria on these rocks when they're going to be submerged, and these bacteria and algae will remove these nutrients, okay? They will slow down erosion. They don't really restore the shoreline, they mask it, but they will somehow stop erosion. However, from my experience working with different communities, and I think there's 50 people here represent that, most of them do not like the way the riprap looks like. They think that it's not aesthetically pleasing, not nice to look at, and especially that they think that their real estate value is being lowered because of the riprap. And I know a lot of people have a lot of concern, mainly because not of the ecological function of the pond, but because of the lake view. And we have research that we've done that shows that about 20–25% is added value to the real estate when you have a pond view from your home. Okay, so the lake is a big issue here, or the ponds. So the riprap do help. However, the problem that you can have with riprap is one, I guess, is supposed to be permitted, and I suppose you will have the permit. I worked a lot with Collier County pond, and they're not supposed to put more than a certain percentage of shoreline. So for Collier County, it's 20%. For Lee County, I don't remember off the back of my head, but maybe there is none.
There is none.
Okay, but for Colliers, they actually make proactive motion to actually limit at 20% because the residents are really not happy with the way it looks like. The other problem we have with riprap is as the water will cover those, they will grow algae which are calcareous, so calcium carbonated algae, which look like the algae you have in the Everglades. And it might sound fantastic, and I do love these algae, but they kind of blanket the top of this rock, and then they detach, come to the surface, and then just wander into the open of the lake, eventually covering it completely. These are good algae, but they are not aesthetically pleasing for a lot of people. All right, so that's a problem we have with riprap. So we have alternative, and I'm not sure if, I think you have a pond committee or something like that, if actually they went to the workshop that we have every
Chris
year.
and I were down there with you.
Wet plan? Okay, yes. So we have other alternative, and the two other alternatives that I know of that restore the shoreline in an ecological way, increasing actually the longevity of your lakes at the same time, are twofold. One is geotextile, which is basically a tube that you fill with the sediment from your lake. So at the same time, you're removing the sediment from your lake, increasing its volume and increasing its longevity, because a lake has to be demucked technically every 15 years, but it looks like, from my research, more like every 30 years. All right. And then you can plant the top of that geotextile with turf or whatever you like. I don't really like turf, but something that's more ecologically functioning in terms of filtration. That's one way. The other way is called shore socks. So it's basically, and I'm not advocating for any of those, right? I'm just giving you the fact, you guys decide. You will have the ownership of your properties, right? And then, so the other one is basically like, I'm French, so I'm gonna use a crepe. You know, all right? So you basically anchor this thing around the shoreline, put some, generally, plants in there, I mean plant debris. It could be hay, it could be pine straw. Actually, I think they moved to pine straw. And then they close it up. That thing degrades and turn into soil. Also prevent algae because of the chemicals they release in the water, and filters that water running off into the pond because you have plants that are probably planting on top of it. So you're doing here also a very good thing for your pond because you're increasing the longevity. So from my research, again, these are facts, a water body is not a good way to filter nutrients. It's not. if you really want to filter nutrients, you should have wetlands. Nobody wants to live, from what I've heard, next to the Everglades. All right. So with time, I've learned to find compromises in those different communities I worked with, where we say, why would we turn just the shoreline into a wetland and you still have the open water? And I work especially with Naples Botanical Garden, and we have a list of plants that you can plant from the high level zone where you have less water to the edge of the water of different statures. So if you still want to be able to see your pond, you can have that. And these plants prevent erosion, one, ecologically, filter the water mechanically and nutrient uptake by the plants and the roots and the bacteria that are within the plant. And you will not have these nice algae that I like, but for you guys, algae that would float in the center of the lake. Because
I need you to kind of wrap it up. Is there a
that's pretty much it,
message
ma'am.
that you want us
So that's
to-
basically, I hope you're making educated decision, because it will be difficult to remove the riprap once it's installed.
And if you want to give the
Yes,
that
that's,
to April or
here it is.
Margaret, may I
Bruce,
make a
that's
response?
And Serge, haven't you been
Yeah.
in here to talk with Elle before?
Yeah,
About our
I
ponds?
know,
Yeah, yeah,
your face looked very familiar.
Yeah, we
I'm
saw you
sorry I
down at the
didn't.
lake
Yeah,
last
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Okay, well,
Dr. Thomas, a couple of things. One, are you familiar with Lee County Ordinance 10418?
Well, I'm not a legal person, so
Okay.
I'm getting into this, but not.
10418 is what our community and our CDD adopted a couple of years ago. Adopted 10418, and 10418 indicates that the littorals, where, unless required by the development order, littorals are not going to be built on residential property. The second thing that we have ran into is, and a point to be made, I don't know where you got the idea of riprap. The only thing that we're doing is the toe of the slope. We're using Armamax, and I think you're familiar with Armamax.
Yes.
We've used the geotube, and it was a disaster.
It
The
depends on the
problem with the
sediment.
geotube was we were sucking the material out of the bottom of the pond, putting it in the geotube, and then we were trying to compact it to 95% standard Proctor density, and it's like compacting mush. Didn't work. So we're bringing in right now solid fill. We're putting in the Armamax material. We're reconstructing to a minimum of 4-to-1 slopes. We're putting number 4 stone, not riprap. We have switched from the burrito to the riprap at the bottom to stabilize the bottom. It was the only choice we had. The lake levels have dropped significantly since we started the construction, and the material that we're wrapping the burrito with would be exposed to the sunlight, and it would fall apart. The last thing we want to do is to put in a burrito at the bottom of the pond and have it start breaking up. The thing that's amazing is that we didn't do any of this stuff blindly. This community, this CDD, did 4 ponds experimentally, I might say, to get used to this. We did pond 104, 106, 107, and 108 under different formats. One of them, we were going to put littorals around because that community, we thought had a littoral requirement, but we have since found out it didn't have a littoral requirement. Called for littoral shelves, but not the littorals. Where, going forward, we've got 64 lakes and flowways, ponds and flowways. Where we have communities with a DO requirement, we will be honoring and putting back littorals in those. The problem we've got, these first 5 we've got, do not require it. We've got other ponds where we've had on the pond community, at times I thought there was going to be an assassination when I mentioned littorals as a possibility. I'm an engineer and I know the advantages of littorals. But the combination of 10-418 and the lack of a DO requirement, development order requirement, does not give us any footing on which to go in and do that. Now, we have 30-some thousand lineal feet of golf course property that the golf course would love to put littorals in the full length, and that's what we would like to do. Unfortunately, our order of business has been, we're going to do the residential first and proceed. But those are some of the limitations. We have not done this blindly. We have done one heck of a lot of work. We've spent 1.5 years on a committee creating pond standards that were acceptable to everybody, including the board that finally passed them. But our limitation was on private property, residential property. 10-418 discourages the use of littorals, and that's the way we went.
Okay, well,
So that's kind of where we're at.
that's very good. I mean, I think just it emphasizes how difficult it is to find a happy middle. And, you know, you have all this regulation, and I'm on the ecology research, hard research part, and you are into the applying, the law and make everybody happy, or at least try to find the Goldilocks spot.
The,
so that
the
people are
picture
happy.
you sent, the toe of the slope is the riprap. Everything up above that to 6 inches above the control elevation is gonna be number 4 stone, like we have on 4 ponds already. And have been very successful, and if you go to one of our community, 2 of our communities, Sable Dunes and the cottages, and go over there and tell those people that you're gonna pull the stone out and put in littorals, wear red and have a nice flak suit.
Okay, yeah. So again, the idea is to filter as much as possible the water. So
We
from me,
understand that.
I understand from the homeowner's perspective, it's a different perspective. So it's all
Understand.
about perception and perspective.
We understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, do we have?
No, that'll be the end of the speakers today, except for Mr. Caldwell, and I think he's gonna address that when the agenda item comes up.
Okay.
And move to district engineer report.
District engineer.
We're already to me. 4 o'clock. I had nothing to report today, but if you have questions, I'm here.
Any questions for the district engineer? Apparently
I'm sorry,
not.
what was the question?
You got anything for Dan?
Do you have any?
Yeah, hold on. Were you trying to leave?
No, not yet.
I think issue 1, Chairperson Margaret, we right now have a contract with Tetra Tech to do the facility planning through the first 13 ponds. It appears that when we get done with those 13 ponds, we need to be in position to go to phase 2. And in order to do phase 2, we have to have a facility plan in order to qualify for SRF funding. So I think that we should be talking about getting a proposal from Tetra Tech to do a facility plan on the next 13 ponds. I don't have a feel for what that cost is going to be. The second thing is relative to engineering is Chris and I this past week went down and met with South Florida Water Management District. Chris, are you going to talk about the irrigation issue in your speech? You going to be here, or are you leaving?
I'll be here.
Okay, well,
Well,
I'll just
depends on what
I
time.
won't steal Chris's thunder then.
Yeah,
Okay. The other one we'll just wait till Chris. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.
Second
All right.
district council, B.
Yes, and Ms. Brewer touched on it, and hopefully the memorandum was self-explanatory as to the various reviews. And just want to touch briefly on what Ms. Brewer indicated was outside the scope of my purview. I look at my role in the board, giving legal advice and also just advice generally as to what actions the board could or should take or should not take in particular instances. And with regards to those various projects, I'll call them the roads coming off of Cypress Grove Drive. My concern is, and I've expressed in some memorandums, is that the district has not yet taken Cypress Grove Phase 1 or Phase 2. And I don't believe it's advisable to take the roads that are off of it until we take the road that leads to those roads that are off of it. So I think that's and I'm not quite sure what the issue is about Cypress Grove 1 that's been hanging around since November 2012. We've reported, advised them of items need to be addressed, and Cypress Grove 2 is more recently. But Rhonda mentioned that a couple times when I noted that the district has not yet accepted Cypress Grove Drive, and my recommendation is not to accept the roads coming off of Cypress Grove Drive, to accept that main road. And again, it's a board policy decision, but whether they want to take that roadway. And then we also referenced various issues with regards to drainage and tract L and the stormwater drainage system. So if you have any questions about these, and I appreciate Rhonda or David submitting a response to Metarita Phase 2A and Solaro, and I'll jump on those when I see those. And I don't know, and David, are you going to ask, where'd David go? Did he leave? Oh, there he is. You're hiding behind Mr. Gephardt.
Not deliberately.
And on the question, the issue with regards to getting that letter for Casella, the one about the utilities, I don't know if you want to address that or if the board wants to take action on that now after hearing from Chris on that aspect. That's the, I think the engineer from RWA made a request on behalf of WCI to have the district send a letter to the city about the district's intent to take the Casella utility once there are a sufficient number of available connections. And so, Chris, I don't know if you want to handle that or wait for David to ask for that. That's at page 21 of the agenda, and that was in my memo agenda with Casella.
I'll wait
So if
till
there are any other
David
questions
brings
of
it
the
up.
board?
Wait till David brings it up.
Okay, wanted to mention that, just didn't know. Any questions, or want to wait till after David?
Any questions of you specifically? Yeah, I've got several, Margaret.
Go ahead.
First of all, is the champagne still on ice on the road turnover to Gateway Boulevard?
Yes, and John Fredema, I'll be getting him the revised documents next week. WCI has provided some, so we're getting close to, I'm bringing the cork.
Okay.
To open the cork. I'm starting to cut the aluminum foil.
Well, we're trying to put these in order of the
Yes, sir.
easiest to do.
Yes, sir.
I did some research, and looking at the development order for Gateway, I did find a requirement that the FPL easement was indeed identified as a linear park, and that a path was to have been installed by the old WGC back then to do that, which then raises the question, is that cart path, is that path our responsibility, and is that 660 feet or portion thereof, the FPL easement, under our responsibility as a part of our park system
And jurisdiction.
and jurisdiction?
I didn't follow up, but I retrieved the materials because way back when there was a park and recreation fee, and
'Cause
that went away, and there was a report prepared by Gatling Jackson. I think that's what you're referring
Yeah,
to.
and my opinion is, I believe it is.
I believe it is.
In which case, we've got some activities that need to be addressed that I believe that Jim Brand brought up at the last meeting, fencing, improvements. Let's go on.
We'll table that until Tony comes back.
Yeah,
with a
because I'm gonna
response.
tie it into something, and that is the issue of the park itself. I am of the opinion that we've had requests of residents, and I certainly get it on the street, of things like bocce ball and, what's the other one? Pickleball, sorry. I don't play anything that requires running or not the use of a golf cart. But a lot of people are interested in it. A lot of communities are doing it. I guess Punta Gorda has a big facilities. Naples has a facility. They can't build them fast enough. I would like to take and get us to retain, as I found out from my neighbor, I believe there's to the tune of $130,000 of grant money setting in our name with Lee County that we could tap to get a consultant in to look at our parks, especially with the idea of the FPL easement, if it indeed is ours, tie our system together. I am not ready to go out and spend $15 million in putting in a world-class tennis facility, but I am interested in having their input of how we would facilitate putting in a racquetball or, not racquetball, bocce ball or pickleball on the facility, whether it be their recommendation to go to the main park by the pool, go over here by the soccer, or go over by the fun park. But get professional advice on how to do that. Tony gave me a copy of a report, and I have not had a chance to read it yet. This one's real up-to-date, December 93, talking about Gateway's Park and Recreation Program. Would like to read it. I don't even know that pickleball even existed back then.
It probably did.
But the issue is, we have access to this money to go and get a consultant to tell us how to do it right.
Yeah, and I reached out
And
to
I
Chris.
would like
last-
to
I reached
do
out-
that.
I reached out to Chris last week, and we're trying to research to see who we can find, whether it's someone from the county or an independent individual. So there is some traction there. It just
Well, I don't even know if this firm, Gladding, Jackson, Kircher, Anglin, Lopez, good God, Reinhardt even exists still, but if we've got somebody that's still, that they are existing and they have knowledge of us, it might be something that where we would save some money by, they're already knowledgeable. But I think it's time to start tying this stuff together. That $130,000 sitting down there in a form of a grant money, I'll just bet you $1 it's probably earning us nothing. So why are we not spending it and facilitating what the people, the residents want to see?
Yep.
And do it.
On that issue, Mr. Tinkle, and David can correct me if I'm wrong, I think David Jones was a local architect. David, I think he designed some of the park system. some of them in Gateway.
Well,
And David's been here he came here many, many years ago. And so that might be someone, if you want to, who's familiar with Gateway to discuss.
Well, PP's doing it. They have it over there at their facility. They have these facilities. I don't know, I'm sorry?
We've got 6 now.
Yeah, David, did you guys do the designing on that? Or interior, or did you subcontract that out? You did it within,
WCI did it.
interior,
Yeah.
or you subbed it out? David,
We had it designed.
you had it designed? Okay, well, I hate reinventing the wheel. If somebody has done this type of stuff, get somebody that's knowledgeable and knows what we do. But my point is, let's don't sit on this any longer. Let's get somebody on and engaged and come in here. I don't care if we bring in 2 or 3 of them and talk to them. My first thought is bring 2 or 3 in and do like people did to me for 40 years up north. You 3 go back and bring us a proposal of what your preliminary plans are, gratis, if you want the contract to do the next step.
It all depends on what the scope of the project is, whether or not we then have CCNA issues.
We'll keep it within that number.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
you have anything else for
I'm
council?
going down the line. I'm trying to pick the ones that are easy. Girl Scout building, is gonna tie back to Tony. Where are we on that, and are we at a position yet where we know that that's a go? The reason I'm bringing that up is I'd like to find out from Tony, how do we go and immediately look at borrowing of the money to pay for that building?
There's a couple of things. I got the title commitment last week, and we have until April 20th to make any objections, but I provided a preliminary letter to the attorney for the seller outlining what we may list, and we've been trading emails, and this week, and we'll hopefully have a phone call tomorrow about some of the concerns we have about some covenants and their position on it. And Danny has, and we have until April 20th to make those objections.
Well-
And Danny has had some conversation with Tyler with the Lee County zoning folks about that building.
Well, my bigger question wasn't into that detail. It was more of what do we need to do that in the event we clear all those hurdles, we take and go and debt finance this for 20 years instead of robbing $350,000 out of our account. We agreed about a month ago, we agreed to tell them that we're doing it to keep and make sure that it didn't hold up the sale. But after we buy it, there's nothing that says we can't go back and take out a loan to pay that off.
What you may want to do is either have Chris or Stephen contact, well, like Florida Community Bank. I mean, we're talking, what, $350,000?
Well, there's another one, the reason I bring it up. We have a new bank in town, and they would love to do
Which one's
business
that?
with us.
Which one is that?
Sanibel.
Sanibel Captiva Bank. They would love to talk to us about a loan on that building.
Yeah, and the reason, well, you wouldn't mortgage the building, because it's a governmental body, you don't do that. But Florida Community Bank is very well familiar with community development districts.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
just to give you an example, I did a line of credit for one of my districts, and they were the lender, and it took me about an hour to review the loan documents. I had maybe 5 comments. Their attorneys have it down pat.
Well, my thing is that I hate to see us take that 350. I agreed with the 350,000. I sponsored that motion made by Bill to withhold that until we got the deal so that we didn't have it tied up with a financing exclusion or a financing clause. Once we get past that, I want to go back and revisit financing it instead of taking that 350,000 out.
So you just want to
Makes a
know
lot more sense.
when's the timing on that?
When's the timing?
Yeah.
And I don't want to wait till the last second and then find out, well,
It's
why
too
didn't you
late.
bring that up
Yeah.
a month ago?
I guess the question is, do we want to give Stephen that direction to go find somebody, or would the board give that direction to who to?
I don't know, does that require a motion or just an action of the request of the board to do that?
We can request.
I don't know why it would hurt to do it.
Request them to do it.
Yeah.
And it would have to be 5
It may not be
years.
something that we end up doing, but there's not any sense in.
No harm, no
making
foul.
it.
And again, it'd be 5 years. You don't want to do it, otherwise you have to develop it. Regardless of the dollar.
Anything
He's a pain over here.
You know, the
You
legislature.
didn't hear it, but he
Yeah, I
said
know.
that it's gotta be upon validation again.
If you do the 20 years, so.
Okay.
And it's not.
Notwithstanding that, yeah, one last one. And you were going to report on it, and you didn't bring it up, so I will bring it up. Where are we at on these silly no parking signs in Stony Brook? Let's bury that deal once and for all.
I've got that for the 20th. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's the 20th?
Yeah,
Oh, I
that
thought it
was the second
tonight.
meeting. I could be
Sorry,
wrong. It's
sorry,
the 20th.
Sorry,
No,
I
it's
thought
okay.
sure it was tonight.
It's right there on my monitor,
Okay. That's all I have for tonight.
along with Joe's face. Just kidding.
Ms. Flaherty, did you have anything?
Yes,
for
the 20th.
council?
Not
I thought it was
anything for
tonight.
council.
You have anything
No.
for council?
Yeah, thank you for
Okay.
doing these. That was not the point.
Business manager report?
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Mr. Caldwell, did you have anything that you wanted to discuss as far as the Pelican Preserve area? Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, go, please.
Good afternoon, Dave Caldwell with Lennar WCI for the record. It's not a point of argument, it's just a difference of opinion. Tony suggests that the entry road into Pelican Preserve, Cypress Grove, should be the first acceptance of a conveyance package to the district and not take the other adjoining subdivisions or neighborhoods out of line. So, and he may have his arguments for doing so. The reason it's taking so long is that we were still having improvements and corrections and punch list items to do on that. These other packages have been into the district, in some cases from last fall. Those packages were 100% done and ready. So it cost us money, WCI, Lennar, to keep these things maintained or repaired or in the condition for your acceptance. I don't think there's anything in your permit criteria manual that says there's some sequence of acceptance on these things. We have packages that you approved for construction as independent packages for whatever they were, a neighborhood, subdivision, Matarita 2A, Solera, whatever. Those are done complete and in compliance with your requirements. We're at the point where we'd like you to accept those and look at them as individual packages, which they are. You have the easements from the plats for the Cypress Grove in order to use either for utilities, access, drainage, whatever it is. You have that by plat. You had it for years. It's not an issue in that regard. It's just, it's not for me to defend why Tony suggests you do it in a certain sequence. I'm telling you, we're trying to get to the point to turn over for the district acceptance. It's not ready. If it was, the package would be into you. But the other packages are all done and acceptable as far as we know.
Yeah, I said it 2 weeks ago. If we have problems with our design permit criteria manual, that are things that are in there that we don't like, but that's what they say, change them. Otherwise, we honor what we said we were going to do.
I'm not aware of anything in the permit criteria manual that says we have to take fee simple title to a roadway track. When we have other segments of the roadway either intersecting with it that we have not yet accepted title to. I mean, that's my concern. And I guess from a maintenance and operational perspective, you end up with a jigsaw puzzle.
Notwithstanding that technicality, which I'll rely on legal, anything else that says we're going to accept this as a individual package per our manual, I think we should honor.
Okay, understood.
I have any other questions if the board should have it?
I got some comments.
Go ahead. Come up to the podium, please.
Have him explain what happened first.
For the record, Bob Geppert from Pelican Preserve, PPAC. Specific to this item and the sequence in which they're coming, I would like to remind the board that PPAC has not been made aware of the 6 presentations since Track L. We have moved very forward and very quickly on Track L to the best of our ability within the limitations of the inspection reports of piping, et cetera, that we require. The last report we got back from WCI's contractor, Morris Rowley, was dated February the 7th. We are still waiting, and they gave us a report specific to the ponds and stormwater piping that said, here are the deficiencies. David and WCI have a copy of that, of course, and as soon as that's worked off, then at least that portion of it will be done with. Now, with respect to the ones he's saying that are late and that we are tardy, we went all through this last meeting. PPAC hasn't been involved. No one has done a single thing to inspect any of those properties. And how that happened is beyond me. But we are involved. We are extremely dedicated, and we will come out and walk and do all of it. As of yesterday, RWA is going to give me the packages for the piping for the other 6 packages that they were talking to. We will go through them. I've asked, and I just received a copy of, or at least 3 of the video inspections. Up to now, we have not been able to gather all of them, and we need all of them, and then we need to analyze them. They all require written reports that tell us what we're going to see on the video from the engineer's perspective. When that's done, we're going to move very, very quickly on this. But let's not get the cart before the horse. I totally agree with Tony's position. If you look at Track L and the subsequent 6 projects, they are nice, even in a line. You do 1, then you go to 2, then you go to 3, then you go to 4. And Pelican Preserve Boulevard, why we would start to chop that up or chop up Cypress Grove and jump from one area to another doesn't make sense to PPAC. We'll get it done. You know, I'm very empathetic that they've been waiting 6 and 7 months. And I don't know why they took that long to do it, but they've known PPAC. They come to PPAC meetings. They know we review it. And the fact that they chose not to put us on those distribution and request lists, you know, sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. So there was some negligence there, too. There's plenty of blame to go around.
Translate this, Bob. Is there something that we have not submitted to PPAC? Or is it some other party that hasn't submitted
Is the
something?
we this board?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
We were totally in the dark for the 6 packages after Track L. No one shared a single thing with us.
Well, we talk.
In the past, have you been copied?
In the past, we've been integrally involved. We've done the walk-arounds.
WCI on those?
Well, I always got it from the district manager, as I said before.
Okay.
I've always
So-
got it
so
from
when
the.
you're in the loop, you're talking about, you're in the loop because the district
The
has-
ball dropped with the functions here. So we were just, we're sitting there wondering. We talked about it openly in many, many meetings.
Yeah, I remember talking about it.
And a side comment from our perspective was, it's saving us money. We're not going to push it. If WCI is not in the rush, we're certainly not in the rush.
I hesitate asking this. Of these 6 or 7 that were presented at that last meeting that Rhonda was spitting off and I was writing out as fast as I can, you haven't seen any of that?
I've seen none of it. None except what I have done since that meeting. I've called RWA. You know, we've certainly had some comments here, and people have said, oh, I got that video.
Is it
or
that we're not getting enough copies, that we can't get it, or what?
communication, not copies.
It's communication, and I think when they had the change operations manager, and previously they were involved intimately on the walkthroughs and a few, and it just all of a sudden it wasn't communicated to them, and they weren't invited to the walkthroughs except for 1 or 2.
Well, what, we can solve that going forth right now.
I know we got it solved going
But the
forward.
issue is that the documents that you're missing. and
Now we need
still
to catch up.
continue to be missing,
Yes.
what does it take in this day and age to send them to you?
Well, I got 3 of them, and I'm looking for 6, so I just got 3 today. So somebody has to tell me.
Chris, is there any objections from staff to get the missing?
Oh, no, we're pulling those right now,
Okay,
and
all right.
I'm also going to start attending the PPAC meetings and work a little closer
Yeah.
with the Pelican group.
Won't be an issue in the forward.
No.
But now we got to play catch-up. So the discs are one thing.
But the whole reason why you're at the podium
Yes.
is to say you agree with Tony's position.
Yes, I do.
Everything else will fall into place once you
Absolutely.
get the information.
I mean, it's not new to us. We've been doing this for years. We know how to do it.
Okay,
It's just that lately we've not been in the loop. Thank you.
thanks.
That's something then that I think we're going to have to address on the permit criteria manual, is to have an amendment to that to indicate, because it sounds like PPAC's not included by reference in our permit criteria manual.
That's correct.
Well.
So it sounds
if
like it
that's-
kind of fell through the cracks
If
over
that's
the
a
years.
requirement, but, I mean, that could be, that could just be a district standard to include them in.
Could be, but didn't happen.
Well, I mean, going forward.
Yeah, going
right
forward,
now,
we need to
that's
fix
what-
it.
Well, no, what I'm saying is, right now, PPAC wants to be involved, but if we put it in a permit criteria, then it's like for perpetuity. There may come a time when PPAC doesn't care about being involved in that. So I think just to conclude them in the distribution as a routine.
Well, you say
is
as
good enough.
required.
Yeah.
Yeah,
is
We're
good enough.
required.
Yeah.
Okay.
and that's just an internal policy, we need to,
Right, exactly.
I don't know if David had a response to any of that.
I think you made a statement.
Anything
Any
else?
any follow-up, David, on that?
Well, I understand what Bob is saying, but again, I disagree that there's somehow an absolute sequence of acceptance. There isn't. You'd like it to be in a particular order, but we don't have the facilities, the sequence you'd like. We can't give you that sequence. We've given you other materials. There's nothing in your permit criteria manual that says it has to be in a particular way. We've designed it, permitted it, you reviewed it, permitted it, and inspected all of these as independent projects.
So, but Bob, if there, Phil, if there's no sequence, then we're pretty much determining what our sequence is, which is road completion, right?
And members of the board, I think the sequence was established and Cypress Grove was first submitted in November 2012.
Tony, that has nothing to do with, we may have submitted that project to you as the first thing out of the box in that particular area. But there's nothing that says that everything has to be done as to the acceptance or when they are completed or constructed or anything else in a particular way. Each project is designed, permitted, and given over totally independent.
Again, my recommendation to the board is that it would be operationally, and I think it's the wiser course is to require the main spine road, I'll call it Cypress Grove Drive, to be completed and finished first before the other one's off of it.
And what's your legal opinion,
And David, I guess
Tony?
my question is for
How is that a good legal opinion? What?
I guess my question is, Madam Chairman, if I may ask, for the last 4 years, we're still waiting for the resolution of the issues raised as to the defects in the submittal for Cypress Grove Phase 1. And I'm not
Tony,
sure why
didn't
there's
I
nothing
just say
addressed.
we're still working on that?
I understand, but I'm not sure why those haven't been resolved in over 4 years.
Marty, I
I'm
think
gonna,
that
I'm gonna step in
well, the
here.
thing I want to
Sorry.
get, the one thing
Yeah.
I want to make clear is that it sounds like the issues with us and PPAC can be resolved, that when a submittal is done, we get together.
Right.
We
And
get together.
let's start there. Let's make sure that PPAC has everything that they need on these submittals. And then when they've reviewed them and appeared that they're happy with them, we'll review this again, David. okay,
Sure.
For the individual.
I assume
projects.
when you were directing your conversation to your staff here.
Yes.
Okay.
And over here, too.
And over here.
Okay.
So we will move forward on that.
Yeah, I just hate holding, I've been on that side of the fence and I just don't understand that at all. And if there is a central road like this road that we're talking about, there's more than one way to address that issue of having to have it. You can put conditions and other things on it. So I don't understand where that would necessarily, and I don't know all the details,
Well,
but a
let's
lot of
just-
times that can be handled that way.
Let's just start with honoring what PPAC has requested.
Sure.
We'll go there.
Board, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Okay. Business manager.
This ain't that complicated.
April White, your business manager, for the record. I'd like to take an opportunity to clarify some of the conversation that's been had, since we're talking about disciplines and administrative process of the district. When it comes to PPAC, since my arrival last February, I believe it was in April, Mr. Geppert and I and Tyler and several other people walked a lot of ponds. And so I was well aware from the very beginning that PPAC was an integral part of the process. At no time has there ever been a change administratively that anything would get to our board for approval without the input and it being vetted to PPAC. What happened is that Cypress Grove walkthrough with all those ponds created quite the large punch list, and they have been working on that for some time. And then when Chris and I transitioned and Chris came on board, what happened was he started picking up a lot of the operational items, and there was 1 or 2 schedules of walkthroughs that I declined because Chris was taking over. And I failed to remind everybody, and I didn't notice that PPAC was not on the appointment. As far as the 6 items that we're talking about, I believe 1 or 2 of those are utilities. And I am not aware that our utility acceptance packages gets vetted to PPAC. Do utility packages get vetted to PPAC? for utility turnovers. I'm not aware that they're part of that process. And also, I apologize, but I was not aware that when we got to the legal packages that we submit to Tony, that those were to be vetted to PPAC. I thought that that was an internal legal function, that by the time we got to that review, that that was a function of legal, and that that particular document packet did not necessarily happen to need to be vetted to PPAC. If that is the case, if I need to vet all documents that are submitted on these turnovers to PPAC, I'm happy to do that. But I was not aware that those particular packets get vetted. I was under the understanding that PPAC's involvement was more from the operational level, more in the engineering process as far as what is being inspected and what is being objected on that inspection, and then making sure that they're part of that integral process. Am I misunderstanding?
Let's ask
what?
Bob, that's an easy way. Bob, what do you see?
And I'm glad you referenced the walkthrough that we had,
Mm-hmm.
because that was exclusive to Track L. I've never seen anything, or heard anything beyond Track L. And what I heard in the meeting from Mr. Caldwell was that the district got submissions in August, September, October, November, December, and January.
Well, answer your question, Mike. No, but the question is, do you feel that PPAC needs to be involved in the scenarios that April stated, or just on the operational side?
Oh, I think we're involved in everything,
Even utilities?
even utilities. Because we check and monitor
I didn't know.
FPL bills. Now, when I'm saying utilities, I'm thinking of things like light and water.
Drinking water and sewer, I think, but also for clarification, all of these projects had stormwater management,
Every one of them.
including
Yeah, I'm
Casella.
just trying to,
Stormwater
trying to get to the
management,
end instead of having.
No, including
more
Casella. I think
conversation.
there was
Let's-
indication Casella was just
Right.
utilities, no.
So Doug, we're down to the nitty-gritty of counting light poles and what our bills are and making sure they're right.
I mean, look, I'm a fan. So.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, we're into that kind of nitty-gritty.
So, I understand that, but how about the legal package? Is that, I mean,
That's not something we have done.
okay,
If
so
it is
we can
a
exclude
part
that,
of the package,
everything up to that,
they do this
or
on
everything
the-
leading up to that point.
Yeah, and
I would say
Tetra Tech-
inclusion,
Tetra
and
Tech's
then the
involved in
legal
this too.
package, we can, it's not required that
Right.
PPAC approve.
Right, so we
Maybe
got-
for awareness.
Although, yeah, what happens typically is PPAC will notify me of any concerns they have that they wish to be
Yeah.
presented to the board in my memorandum.
And I would say just in, you know, being good partners, I would maybe copy, you know, for awareness, but we wouldn't wait for any approval for
Right,
PPAC.
and
on the legal
I'm happy to
package.
do that. I just
Yeah.
want it made clear that there's been no administrative change, there's been no intentional exclusion, and at no point in time would anybody have brought something to the board, an asset transfer for the Pelican area, and request board approval without that document summary having on there the opinion and status of PPAC.
Noted.
So the submissions from
But it fell
last
through the
September,
cracks.
October,
But it
August,
fell through the
I mean,
cracks.
August, September, October,
Well, we've had a
that
lot
had
of
not
change.
come to PPAC, would have come to us before they came to the board.
Absolutely. I intended to, I always want to put on my document the position of the PPAC vote, when it was voted on and what the vote was on the recommendation.
And my only other comment for that, now don't want to belabor it, but then when they said we were 6 months late or 8 months late, they're absolutely correct by design. Because if we're the last step, why would we wait 6 or 8 months to be told about it?
Shouldn't be.
Right, and so
But I'm
that's what
saying
I
that's
mean.
the
It's the timing of the involvement that we're missing, not that we've excluded them. There's been no intentional change. We're just missing the timing of the involvement and the steps. So we'll just make sure that all of the packets are vetted to PPAC upon arrival. When I distribute that email to the engineers and/or to legal, I'll just copy PPAC on it.
Please.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Okay.
You took care of one of the issues for the Stony Brook parking. Status of the Girl Scout building from an operational standpoint is everything has been ordered. We've got the inspection report back. We're still waiting on the appraisal and the Alta survey. So I think we've got everything else back in that's under review. And
Do we
I
have an
don't,
anticipated date?
what's that?
Do we have an anticipated date?
Yeah, I
when
believe
we'll
we.
have a go, no-go?
I believe we have a date of the first meeting in May to bring it back to the board.
Yeah, the effective date of the contract was March 13th, if I'm not mistaken, and we have 60 days, the due diligence to say yay or nay, no go, like you're indicating. And so that
So that gives a little cushion too.
Yeah, no, the title objections have to be in April 20th. I'll make those, and meanwhile, I'll try to work those out with Sean Ellis.
Right, so
here,
we have
too.
internal deadlines, but ultimately, I believe we're scheduled to bring it to the board the first meeting in May.
And that's, yeah, and it's well within the 60 days.
Mhm.
Yes.
I don't know if Chris was going to update you, but we are officially on gas at the pool, March
All right.
27th.
I saw that email, thank you.
Yes. So we're gonna put some alerts out on the website. We got a little behind on our updates on the website, when Diane went on vacation, and so some things happened that should have been out there.
Did you have a question?
I
Ms.
did have a
Flaherty?
question. The inspection report, are we getting that before the May meeting, or?
You certainly can. What is the preference of the board as far as the internal reports?
I think it
On-
would be good to distribute.
Okay,
Yeah,
distribute the
I do
reports?
too.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
And if there's anything noted by our engineer or, who's, Dan, are you reviewing that when it comes through?
They've been distributed to.
Okay. If there's anything, if there's anything for us to be aware of or any call-outs, just if you would note that, please.
Are you talking about the PUD? Did you not? You can bring it up.
Oh, no, what is she talking about?
No, I mean, I just didn't know if the timing, if it mattered between now and the May, whenever we met, but an issue came up today. It's an issue we knew was there, but that building kind of fell through the cracks in terms of zoning. So Tyler's had discussions with the county, and long story short, we're gonna have to go through a PUD amendment. And there's, different ways we can do that. Our recommendation is to actually put that on the current owner. And the reason is that you don't own the building, so you would have to have, I would assume, an agreement with the building owner for you to do that on their behalf. So that, I just didn't know if that was a timing issue, that needed to be brought up before May or not.
I didn't know Gateway had zoning.
Well,
Yeah,
that building,
We have
yeah.
DRIDO.
There's a PUD.
The PUD.
Yeah, it's PUD, and it
So-
was, it's.
It's a zoning document, and I
Yeah,
think
it's
the
a
thing is
zoning
asking for
document.
direction. What we may want to do is,
What are we switching it from to? What is it right now?
Yeah, it was Parks and Rec. It was, I think, at one
It's
point
commercial.
considered to be it's commercial is what it is essentially what we're talking about. They have no objection to it, but the problem is we can't just go and do it. We've got to go through the administrative process without going to a hearing. It would require, I think Tyler had 2 or 3 things that they said they're going to put it in writing, but one of them is a letter from the HOA, neighboring HOA, that they have no objection. Well, I'm going to think that, the residents that immediately border it are also going to have to, not just the HOA, because if I'm a neighbor that's immediately bordering it, I'm going to say, screw you HOA, I have a say because I'm a direct neighbor. So I just didn't know if that's something that,
I guess my confusion
Gateway.
is if it's commercial right now.
no, the use is, no, it's
not.
not, it's usually Girl Scout. And I guess, the thought process is that we would notify the seller, once we get this information from the county, and say, here's this issue, we're still within the 60 days, we're not saying it's go or no go, but this is something that needs to be addressed. And the board in May can say, okay, they are not moving on it, so we're not gonna do the deal, or the parties can agree to negotiate, to extend the time frame for, for that activity to occur.
I understand all
If
that. My
everything else
question is what is it now?
What is the zone now?
What is
do
the
we
zone
need it to
now?
be zoned
It was a
to?
park, public purpose.
I
or
think
something like
Park, yeah, it's had a
The building, the school, the Girl
It
Scout
fell through the
building
cracks.
itself?
It fell through the cracks. They
Oh,
said that.
So it's
Yeah.
zone Parks and Rec, we need it zoned
Yes.
for commercial.
Commercial, I
yeah.
would think, yeah.
And
Government.
to revise the map, yeah.
And
Okay.
we
So
can't
screw that.
purchase unless that zone change happens, or we can, but we're gonna ask
You
them.
can run a
You
risk.
can purchase it,
Yeah.
but
You
you
wouldn't be
might
able
not
to
be
use
able to
it.
use it for what
We
you
can't
want to
use
use
it
it.
with it, and if we do, and
Let them
zoning
do it.
doesn't, okay, yeah, I got
Let
you.
them do
We
it.
don't want it,
Now I got you.
So,
we don't want
I
it.
got
And
Yeah,
I
we were
think
missing
for
that
them
part
to
that
be
it
able
screwed
to
up.
you. You have to.
For them to be able to sell that building, anybody that purchased it would want it to be commercial, so it really does fall on them to get this zoning changed.
And to that point, as some of you may know, that building has had interest in the past from, I think, a daycare, and they actually started to pursue that process, and they actually got a fair good ways down the road with the zoning department before they took a different avenue and backed out of the building. So, the building department there, everybody's familiar with it, zoning's familiar with it. But again, it's the responsibility of the current owner as the owner of the property.
But at this time, the major due diligence concerns that we have expressed earlier, like bugs, mold, and that, have we cleared that hurdle?
Mold inspection has been done.
Okay, no other of those wild things that would cause us concern? Those are all taken care of, we're down to just
Any
basically
concerns at this
paperwork?
Survey.
We have not seen any obvious deal breakers yet.
Okay, that was my point.
Good,
Thank you.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to go over is, I know we did some light discussion on the park design, and just to make sure that staff has the appropriate direction. Sometimes it gets a little difficult for us to tell when you're having discussion on the boardroom floor exactly if there is a direction or if it's just general discussion. But relative to the park design and how we're going to move forward with using the impact fees, there have been previous discussions with using the impact fees when we were talking about creating an additional feature at the pool, a water feature. We talked about using the impact fees for that. So we know we have to use the impact fees for additional services. Right now, as far as the bocce ball court request has been, we're going to have staff look at the commons area and evaluate. I believe we were provided some specifications and just see what the cost would be to kind of just, do a preliminary bocce court someplace. It was conveyed that it was fairly inexpensive to provide that, so we are looking at that over at the pool area. I know there was a comment made, I believe, about the sports complex, and we feel that that would just contend too much with the scheduling issues, and I don't think we want them on the turf of the actual soccer fields. And there's probably not enough even ground anywhere else at the sports complex for a safe bocce court area. So one of the things that we discussed internally is that capital planning of this nature probably is most effectively addressed long-term. So is it the desire of the board for when we start working on the 2018 budget to put something in the budget for, to revisit this park design plan?
No. My deal is I'd like to make a motion to authorize staff to contact 3 park consultants, bring them in here, and we'll talk to them and give them what our idea is that we do this. I really don't want to listen to anybody that's staff on something that requires a professional to do.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I guess there's a misconception that we're going to have these architectural designers come in at no charge. Is that what you're thinking? That we're going to have 3 architectural designers come in at no charge?
Well, let's go back. Let's go back and revisit, because I'll put it on a very similar parallel. When you were doing the landscaping architect for changing this over, you brought in 3 and you had them come in with concepts. No charge. They put in concepts, of which you then looked at them and you picked a firm. We can do the same thing on the parks. Let them go look. We'll tell them we've got the linear park, we got the fun park, we got the soccer deal, and we got the pool. These are our deals. What's your vision for Gateway, knowing that we would like to look short-term, bocce ball and pickleball?
Well, I wouldn't even just say those 2
Well,
things. You're
well,
looking
no,
at
I'm
a
saying-
complete plan.
You're looking for a
expansion.
plan, but you've got to give us some idea what your thoughts are. Give that to them and let them come back with what their concept is.
I've been trying
And
to
then
make that
select
happen
a
for
firm.
10 years to get that very thing to happen.
Well, I'm on this for 4 years and I'm out of here and I want to get some stuff done. And we've had residents that have asked for us to do something, and I don't like to be stuck in mud. And this is something so simple. So simple.
And with the impact fees.
But we have a grant.
with
We
the
have
im-
impact fees.
With the impact fees, we need to find out when those expire and exactly how much is there. And there is a limit to what you can use them for, and then you
Yeah.
have to have
Yeah.
matching, I believe.
that's
From what I understand, it was about
No.
$130,000.
I'm
There
not
was no
aware of any
discussion
matching on the impact
That's
fees.
correct, and I was also told that the fees, professional fees, were eligible. Now, I'm getting this from a previous board member, so I haven't researched it, but if that is the case, and typically on those type of fees, or those type of impact fees, professional fees, legal fees, and the like are eligible. typically.
Right, and so.
Well, yeah, and one of the questions about impact fees, and I think April was referencing or alluding to it, it can only be utilized for new capital facilities occasioned by
what we're talking
demand
about.
for facilities. So
That's what we're talking about.
if that and Lee County is ultimately the arbiter, because they collect it, as to whether it's appropriate. And
Right, it has to
typically,
be
there
approved.
is a life, usually 7 years before they have to be returned, or else you lose that legal nexus, that rational nexus between the need and the facility.
Well, the first step is
So-
to get people in here to talk to give you an idea what the scope you're looking at. We can all get together and figure out what we would like to have independently. I know Kathleen is talking about baseball fields, others have talked about other things. I'm not saying we're gonna go and build, in fact, I would be absolutely opposed to going doing all that. But bocce ball and pickleball is spreading everywhere, and the residents are asking for it, and you can't get anything that's less expensive to go out and build in the way of a park.
And just for clarification too, as long as the project cost does not exceed $325,000, then you don't have to complete, for the short term,
Wouldn't
because
even-
I know Mr. Banks mentioned long-term, which would be more than the 325.
Well, then we have
Then you would
look
have to
at-
go through
we
the
have to look at other
CCNA
financing.
process.
Yeah, we look at other
The
financing.
CCNA process, the competitive
procurement.
of the engineering.
For the
and
engineering.
landscape.
Let's
Yeah.
put some feelers out, see if we can find some
Yep.
consultants
Yeah.
that would be willing to come in, talk to us, and potentially put some type of plan together for us to at least have some
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, get it started.
Okay, but
That
at-
that way staff doesn't have to be involved in that. Let the professionals handle it and tell us how to do it.
Okay, but at this point, we're not working on any capital items for the 2018 budget?
Not at this time.
Okay. And then there was also another conversation when it came to the parks and what residents wanted, is that when we started this approach, I know we had discussed that we probably needed to do some surveys and learn to utilize our website for this type of
That's a good idea.
information from our residents, because I know there are two sides to every issue as far as what we select for our facilities.
Why wouldn't we be able to do Survey Monkey?
We can.
Well, there's
That,
a lot of
I'm simply
different
saying, I'm trying to get down to the issue of what do we do first? Are we going to have these designers, or these architectural designers come in and give us their vision
Well, look-
without polling our residents? Or do we poll our residents first and then kind of frame up
We
with
did do that
these,
for the- we
with
did
these
do that for
architectural
landscaping.
designers, what we
Hold on.
are
It's
looking
simple.
for?
We reach out to a consultant or an expert and say, we want to bring somebody in, like yourself. We're looking at putting a plan together. What do we do first? Do you want to come in, we have conversations, should we have some validation that
Committee.
occurs first? Let's figure out what the process is and then follow that. And if we can reach out to Lee County, or I'm sure I've got a couple contacts with different playground manufacturers, we've got David Jones, I mean, there's
firm
people
here?
that we can reach out and at least get some consulting to say, what do we do first in order to move forward?
Mrs. Flaherty?
Oh, thank you. I would like to do a survey, and I think the survey of what residents want would be our top priority. I don't see why we can't do some kind of survey.
Easy to do.
I don't see why it can't be put out notice in the utility bill that there's going to be a survey, so that the residents do know. I think that's a good way of informing them, so that if they know that they have to go on the website to do it, that's fine. But I think we need to inform them and to do a survey first before anything else is done, because I think we need to know what they would like.
Survey Monkey is no
Well,
cost, right?
But there's something, I mean.
But you do
I
an
don't
annual fee.
I don't disagree with putting a survey out. I think it's absolutely, you have to get the voice of the residents, whether they even want any expansion, or if they do, what do
Simple
they want?
questions.
But, and I've done a lot of surveys, there needs to be a focus and an expectation of what you want to get out of that survey, other than just saying, do you want this, do you want that? Because that information needs to be actionable. So I have no problem with doing a survey. My only thing was, if we can contact someone to ask what are the steps for us to get going, what do we ask in the survey, what level of detail do we go in? And I would imagine there would be multiple surveys in this process. You start big and then work your way down. That's the only reason why I said let's get an expert opinion on what we do first before we jump right in and throw a survey together, and then we realize we got unactionable data.
That makes sense.
Is that the direction of the board?
That's a good approach, yes.
Okay.
Could the person in the audience make a comment?
Yes, if you'd like to come to the podium.
Catherine said she had to finish.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Oh,
Go
that's
ahead.
okay. The survey, I would think, would be saying they were interested in putting some recreational facilities into the common area, and what kind of recreational facilities. And we could name some of them and say A, B, C, and which one do you think is important to you? And that's a simple survey, just, you know, we don't have to say, oh, we want to do a lot, but we can say the bocce.
What's your
court,
interest?
Pickle field, you know, put them in an order of what is your interest. Yeah. That's a suggestion. I also have done surveys.
I mean, was it?
It's easy.
Good for you.
Okay. Moving right along.
You wanted to make a comment?
I would like to give 2 comments,
Come to the podium, please.
if I can.
Please remember to announce yourself.
Yes, dear.
George Huskamp, I'm a Gateway resident. I would like to make 2 comments. First one is that the money that is sitting somewhere that is designated for Gateway to be spent is not free money, in my opinion. You do something, you put it in, you build it, and oh, it's a great thing. But the problem then becomes it has to be maintained, and the cost of maintenance is many, many times what the cost of construction is. Many people say, well, that's okay, we've got lots of people to pay it, but that needs to be taken into account. A second comment is that a survey under some of the suggestions that have been made here would only interest the people who are interested in saying yes, and you get no chance to get negative answers because those people will pay. For instance, you put something in a utility bill, out it goes, just like delete. The people who will keep it are the ones who want that particular thing and don't mind if the rest of the community pays for it, even though they don't get to use it.
Response? George, I totally agree with you, and that's why every survey I've been associated with, there's
Doesn't
always
work.
one that says, do nothing or none of the above.
Yeah.
You gotta give them that choice.
It's easy to talk about what the residents like.
That
But if
solves
you really
the
get down to brass tacks, the residents could be 5 or 6 or 8 because they see you every day and they bend your ear every day and they talk to 1 or 2 other people, and so you got maybe 10 by the time you get through, maybe.
That's
And
why you collect data.
that's what happens. You can come up with a survey, but you don't get the real facts. Legends is a good example. Right now, Legends is going through almost a civil war because they're trying to put 33 pickleball courts, and they're forcing some people to put new roofs on their houses, and you wouldn't believe it, but it's in the neighborhood of an assessment of something like $5,000 or $10,000. And don't quote me on that because I listen, but I don't necessarily write down for record. But it's easy to say, yes, we'd like to have that because residents have been talking to me, but it's how many residents and how really strong are they and who's going to use it, and is it really a good investment, or are we throwing money down a rat hole again? Thank you.
Thank you, George. Businessman.
Okay, took care of that issue. I wanted to make you aware of one of the things, South Florida Water Management District contacted me back at the beginning of March, and they are doing some housekeeping on their old permits, and we do have an open permit on the soccer complex, and what they're looking for from us is substantial compliance certificate. That has been vetted to our engineers, so they are aware of it. I don't think it's a significant issue, but as that progresses on the engineer's desk, I just wanted you to be aware of it. I know there's been somebody else that came in from the charter school that they've been contacted by South Florida Water Management about the open certificate or open permit. It was from 2003 and 4. So that is just something that eventually the engineers will be working on, and that does cost money.
What does South
eventually,
Florida
so.
have to do with the soccer field? What's the issue?
I believe it's
Stormwater,
stormwater.
okay.
Yeah.
Runoff?
Same thing we've been dealing with on
The lights.
And then there's a little conservation area over there.
26,000 permits they didn't pay attention to. For
Okay, and also, my last thing I wanted to talk about is the Intech issue. So at the last board meeting, kind of on the fly, based on the contract expiration schedule, and without preemption, and I didn't quite know how to react to it, but we decided on the fly that we would go out to bid for our Intech contract. So after I marinated on that a while, I had to go back and review our relationship with Intech. This is an organization that's deeply integrated with our operating protocols of the district. All of our computer systems, our backup systems, our email systems, server systems are reliant on Intech. I wasn't prepared for that. We've been working very hard with Intech. We have had some issues. And they've been working very diligently. We've been meeting routinely, trying to resolve some of the issues, and I think that our relationship with Intech has really gotten a lot better than it was a year ago when I started. So what I'm asking you today is, instead of doing a formal RFP, would it be acceptable if I just went out and did some informal cost, got some costs as far as their rates for management, just to make sure that they were competitive, and if they were, to just renew with them, because I think that with everything else that's going on in the district, our organizational changes, trying to hire 2 new positions, we've got some very large things on the agenda that we're dealing with, that right now, moving into the building, they've been over there and looked at the building for us, that I'm just afraid that it would cause problems that I don't even know what they are yet. I don't even know really the full benefits of what they're doing for us, because it's IT and that is not my background. We don't have anybody with IT skills on staff. So right now we rely on them a great deal. And so what I'm asking is, would it be acceptable if we just made sure that their rates were competitive, and when we renewed that contract, that we work with them to make sure that we are getting competitive rates?
I don't have a problem with that. I'll ask the other, I think that makes sense.
I do have a problem.
You do?
I think
Okay.
it should go out for bid. I think every contract that expires should go out for bid. That's my personal opinion.
And I do understand that, and I appreciate it, but we have to consider, as I said in a previous meeting, the priorities, and if we continue dumping more and more stuff on staff, and we continue upsetting apple cart after apple cart, we're just making it more difficult for staff to try and get us a little farther down the road, and we're making pretty good progress. I think in this situation, because this isn't a critical contract, that just making sure that their rates are competitive and looking at it the next time it renews, to renew it as long as they're competitive. If you'll bring the information back to us after you check competitiveness, I think we'd all be comfortable with that.
I mean, what I would do is not only just go out for estimates, but I would have someone come in and assess what our needs are. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't have the expertise and background in IT, we could say, oh, everything looks great. We hardly ever break down. But we could have a consultant come in and say, you know what, your infrastructure is totally inappropriate, inadequate, you're not backing up, you're doing this, you could optimize so much more here and there. If we don't know that, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. So I would say go put some feelers out, but part of that, I would have somebody come in and do an evaluation. And you've got 3 names that I've presented to you that do that very same thing. So I think I would go do that due diligence, and if they come back and say, oh, you're in good shape, or the pricing's competitive, I got no problem. But if they come back and say, you know what, there's some real risk here, then I think we take a step back and then maybe look at going in a different direction.
And that makes perfect sense to me.
Computer's outside my pay grade. I wouldn't be able to tell you anything, so I go along with what Doug said.
Okay, but I think equally that will take as much time to have somebody come in. And I'm fine with doing that. I just wanted to clarify that the relationship has been improving, and that will take a significant amount of time, because somebody that comes in is going to rely on information we provide them. And so I'm going to have to get deeply involved with what we have set up here to do that. So, and that's fine. If that's the direction, we can do that.
I'm not following you. I mean, how deep do you have to get when you say, hey, here's our server, here's our infrastructure? How deep are you saying you need to go? That's gonna hold you up to from doing a 2 to 3 month RFP.
I rely on Intech. If anybody asks me any IT questions, I have to
That's
ask
part of our
Intech.
problem.
Just to suggest, following, you're all the policymaker, it's a management issue, but we went to the same issue a couple years ago. In fact, Entech is our law firm provider, but before we chose them, we went through a process of we asked 3 different consultants to come in. Would you take a look at our system and tell us where our deficiencies are? And some of them actually required a small fee to do that because they have a bit of exposure. But we had some big eye openers when they came in, because we were same as you guys. We're not IT folks, and they showed us some hiccups and some issues, and we articulated what our issues were. And then they looked at the hardware, they looked at the software, they looked at the workstations, and they were pretty good about just giving an informal report
I can't
as
picture
to what
that
it is.
taking that long.
No, that's what I would do.
Can't
Yeah,
take that long.
and that was a pretty good exercise for us, for a
Okay.
law firm.
Okay.
And we have like 19,
I know nothing
20,
about it.
so I mean, you have probably, 20 users total?
With the laptops, I don't know. I think
Yeah.
it's
Especially
I
with
think it's like
potential
25.
expansion. I mean, you need to,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
that was-
good
we
point.
really need to be looking.
We had a
at
wake-up call.
Tie that all together. I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And then you can tell them what your
And if
issues
you
are
want me
too.
to resend those couple companies that I found.
Yeah,
I
we
can
found
send
that a
those
very
over
useful,
to you.
yeah, we found that a very useful
It's a good
exercise.
idea.
Yeah, we can find 2 or 3.
Anything else, April?
I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Oh, Ms. Flaherty.
Could I ask why we don't have a written report?
Because I keep missing the agenda deadline.
Okay. It could
Honesty.
be
And
added-
and by the way, she's not the only one.
It could be added as an addendum after,
Well, I don't know if we,
it's
It's
a
tough to
report,
turn
it's
around.
not usually,
It doesn't even have to be in the meeting book.
You can just email it to them.
Just email.
A report, yeah, you
Okay.
can just email.
Okay, that's fine.
thank you.
District manager.
Says 9 days. Oh, re-scram. So we could tasks today.
Chris Shoemaker here, District Manager, and I will make one quick comment. I think the idea Mr. Banks has is good because you can take those evaluations and turn them into an RFP or what
Yeah.
your needs assessment is.
That's true.
And use the information they have, and even if they offer a slight fee or require that, it's probably well worth it. And that RFP process, they're looking at other contractors, and new contracting, and certainly is a 120-day process, so getting out in front of it now. Talked about the gas
Thank
at
you
the
for
pool.
agreeing with me, Chris.
Well, we talked about the gas in the pool, and when that project first came out, there was some projected savings from using the natural gas over the propane, and in about 6 months, we'll come back to you and see if those projections and what the return on investment for the conversion was. Quickly, also, I wanted to talk about the South Florida Water Use Permit for irrigation. It was a 20-year permit that was issued, however, the quantities were limited. Initially to a 5-year period, and in November 2017, those quantities will be reduced by about 36%. Now, that was also predicated on, they look at how many irrigated acres you have, and at that time, all the new sections in Pelican and also Hampton Park weren't included. And it's a mathematical exercise looking at what the application is for irrigation. And if we do additional pumping, maybe some groundwater modeling. But we'll start looking at that. Of course, that's also tied into the irrigation, and I know Danny and Tetra have been working on an update to the irrigation. And
Chris, I had a question on the first one, the
Sure.
natural gas at the pool. Was there excess propane?
I think they came pretty close, but it wasn't much. They were trying to bleed it down.
Okay.
And they weren't letting it fill up, and what they were doing is having them come in and doing partial fills, why it took a little time.
And then did they seal that tank off? I'm
Yeah, and I-
assuming it's still in the ground, but they sealed it up.
Yeah, and I'm not,
They're taking it out.
yeah, I was
Are
gonna
they
say they're
taking it
removing
out?
it.
Yeah,
The
you don't
fencing's
wanna
already
leave
been.
that.
A lot of times they won't.
Yeah, you don't want that there.
Okay.
Chris,
Just
you're-
curious, just
were
wanted
you-
to
Were you
know.
done on that South Florida
Pretty,
permit?
pretty much just move, we're gonna move ahead with it and look at the quantities, and that may also tie in, because I've had some discussions with Mr. Huskamp this morning, and he has static pressure gauges, on the system, and he was telling me, well, it's usually 80 pounds, and past couple mornings I've gone out there, it's been about 50 pounds. So we went back and checked our system and said, well, there's 6,600 gallons coming out in the morning. Typically, we don't have any issues here, so it must be demand out in the community. And that's another thing we may have to look at is irrigation schedules, irrigation restrictions, when the boulevards, because everybody seems to be turning everything on between 4 and 6 a.m. And even though our system will keep that 6,600 gallons a minute and more up on the front end, as it bleeds out into smaller lines, and Mr. Huskamp's like the canary in the coal mine because he is the very end of the line.
Yeah, and there was 3 sprinkler heads that were busted yesterday that were just straight up.
That causes problems, can cause problems in feed to a neighborhood.
Follow up a little bit more, just to make sure I know what you said because I was there and I was a little shocked. This deal of this reduction, 36%, that means we got the wastewater coming out of the reuse water coming out of the wastewater treatment plant, which we get 100%, and there's no challenge on how we use it. This is talking about our wells. A 36% reduction in our wells on what we're using right now is catastrophic. I'm pretty sure that we've got the facts that he just talked about, bringing these additional acres in, and we talked about 1 inch per acre per week, I believe was the number, or 1 inch per week, and then you can transpose that into the numbers, and we came up with some number sitting there messing with our cell phones, trying to do a calculation if we were waiting on them, and it came out, I forget what it was, like 6,000 gallons per equivalent residential lot per day, or something like that. All of which I don't think is a major problem if we can get that paperwork and get it done. But he does bring up one thing we've got, and it's been a problem in Gateway since I do not know how long. We now have the ability to do something about it. Now, Tony, close your ears, Tony. We can't fine. We can't fine. So we're a tiger without many teeth. But we've got now, with this new computerized system, we know the name and address of everybody that's out there watering in the wrong time. Now, on my street alone, I've got 4 people that water every single day. I hate to even think what their irrigation usage is.
During the daytime?
In the morning.
In the morning?
In the morning. Every day, it's watering. And in Gateway, well, all of Gateway, it's 0 or 1. If you're 0, you get what, Wednesday, Saturday? If you're 1, you're Friday, Sunday, or whatever the combination is.
Thursday.
Yeah, whatever the days are. But that's it.
Yeah.
The other days are off limit. And we now have this data to be able to show who's illegal. I think what we need to do is talk about not a fine, because we can't fine, but a revised cost of water usage outside the day of accepted watering. Right now, it's 31 cents to 33 cents a 1,000 gallons.
31, went from 28 to 31 with the
$3
latest rate increase.
1,000 gallons.
I think that's doable. If you adjust your rules and rates, fees, and charges, I believe you could do that.
I think you can too. Now, we have to go through hearings and we have to go
Right.
through all that. But this has got to stop. If we can't fight our way with math to get that 36% back, we're going to be like Cape Coral.
And
We're going to have a problem. No water.
There's no way to just isolate grids, right?
No, yeah, well, that's, Chris and I talked about that. What Doug is saying is like you and I were talking, and Danny, you and I had talked about this a long time ago, is to go out there and we put in a electrically controlled butterfly operate, or a electrically controlled butterfly valve
Flip switch.
going into each one of these areas, and simply
Regulate.
on Monday, Tuesday, Friday, or whatever the day you can't water, the valve's closed. Now, the downside to that is to get somebody on a grow in, they're up creek without a paddle, they now gotta use $5 a gallon water to water their yard. So I don't know if that's the answer. We now have the system here with this new computer that we just bought that tells us, we know who's the people that are guilty. The easy way is just surcharge them.
Yeah, because if you have somebody that's having to put in a new lawn.
Yeah.
It was a
Would they-
hypothetical. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if we
Yeah.
had that capability.
We could do it very easy, but it creates a lot of other problems. But I'm concerned about that 36%. That is a dramatic reduction to us. If we had that right now, we would be in a world of hurt and a lot of expensive landscaping, having a nice shade of brown.
And that's one thing too, when you have that 4 days a week watering with those two, there are developments that look at and actually make their own internal schedules and spread it out over 7 days a week, and that way that demand can be spread out over more days and more times.
Yeah, maybe some best practices.
Sure.
Chris, that-
The other question that came up is when we were coming back, and I don't know if you've worked it out, but do you need a motion authorizing you, or do you have it within your wherewithal now to go retain Tetra Tech or whoever to assist you in preparing this paper? Because if they come back, as we talked, if they came back and asked for a model, we're into an expensive ballgame.
It would be a task order.
Okay.
And I'll
So you can
talk
do
to
that, you
Danny
don't need
about
a
some
motion
proposals.
authorizing that?
I'll
Okay,
put that
good.
together, and if the
Good.
pricing goes up, we'll bring it back to you.
Because we've got to get that done. We can't have that hanging over our heads. That's serious.
And there are some CDDs with it, when they run into push to shove with quantities in the water management district during the daytime, non-watering hours, they just crank their system down to 20 pounds and no one's heads will come up. And that's the way they address it.
They will have a line at the door.
And the other way, it's no different than conservation rates. The way we have ours tiered, you just, on the higher rates, when those people go over 15,000 a month, you just jack it up.
Yeah.
Some respond to price signals, some don't.
Yeah, well, it's a revenue model.
And Lake
I'm
Bank
glad-
Restoration, I'm not gonna say anything except for it's going along pretty well from our bidded project, and the contractors are moving along.
And I will echo that. This project is going very smooth, and Chris and our inspector and engineer, we ran into a glitch the other day, and by gosh, it got done without, or taken care of without an act of Congress.
And we've got three vendors in, all
Two.
three vendors, two vendors in play right now, and quality of service and processes.
Everything's going.
It's going well, it's gone very well.
Fantastic.
So far. And the only thing I'll say is I wish I was faster at hiring a public works director, because this is probably eating up 5 hours of my time every day, sometimes more, just because you have to have boots on the ground and be involved with it every single day. And the only other thing I was going to bring up is we had requested Bentley to provide an estimate to put streetlights on Griffin. They provided us with a couple different proposals, and basically about $79,000 and some add-ons to make them more efficient in the $4,000 or $5,000 range, but that's
Is that
something. we'll-
LEDs or?
Yes.
Yep, and that's something we'll bring up at another meeting
Yeah,
to
we
discuss,
do.
or budget time.
Yeah, that's, yeah, very good.
That's all I have, and our new utility manager, Kenny Hall, will give his report.
Fantastic.
Utility manager.
Showtime.
And introduce yourself to everybody.
My name is Kenny Hall. I've been with Gateway for approximately 18 months. I came on in September of 2015. I've been in Public Works now for about 11 years. I've worked with the City of Cape Coral for 7 years. I worked with Anne Arundel County in Maryland for 2 years, and I worked in a water meter changeover project for Collier County, which is pretty much one of the reasons why they hired me and brought me in, because you all, the district was currently in the middle of a meter changeover project, so Yvonne and Scott were the ones that hired me for to take over, move into that position to help with the water meter project.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You did a good job on that.
Thank you. We have a notice here from Lee County. Oh, I'm sorry. This is they're gonna convert over and start disinfecting the lines. It's a very common in the water business to change the disinfectant process.
Notices went out to all the property owners.
The notices already went out to
Yep.
that?
Yeah, I
Yep.
got mine.
I got mine.
Okay.
No, it was separate.
Yeah, separate letter.
Yeah, separate letter, just warning you about washing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's, we have started our valve exercising program. We have Dan working on that probably 3 to 4 hours every other day, whenever he gets a chance. Out of our daily routine, we are going out there and exercising those valves. And this is a pretty crucial part, something that we really need to be doing, being that I've been involved in 4 breaks with us in our district, and we've had valve failures. So we are trying to get out there as fast as we possibly can and get over them and find out, identify our crucial ones, our critical ones, the spots. Right now, we are up in the old section of Gateway in the commercial side, working that entire area. And once we get that area done, we're gonna move over to the sewer side. And we're gonna do all the sewer valves, all the critical spots, junctions, all that.
You're talking about force main valves?
Force main for sewer, yes, because we had a lesson learned on that one with the valve failure. And it is not fun.
That water's not clean.
No, a water break or a reclaim break is not that big of a deal. We can get out there and isolate it and get it fixed rather quickly. With the sewer break, it's a completely different ballgame. If you have a valve failure and we cannot isolate that line, we ran into some very serious operational issues. So we've got that going right now, and we have the Daniels Reserve Station that's gonna be rebuilt. That is probably gonna start the last week of April or the first week of May. We're just waiting on a panel design for that.
So Kenny and Chris, I know that, Chris, you've done a lot, you came on board, placing pumps and fixing numerous issues. What grade are we at right now? How would you say, are we at an A yet? Are we a B? Are we a C? Where would you grade us?
Incomplete?
Yeah.
First three letters didn't count.
I for complete.
Mr. Banks, I have to say an A+, but truthfully, we're in, it's not strategic planning, we're blocking and tackling and basic. And our priority is emergency response and public safety right now, so that we can sufficiently respond to anything that happens. And we're also moving forward, the valve exercise is a good example of preventative maintenance versus reacting to things. So those are the top priorities. Kenny and I sat down and went over them. It's public safety, emergency management, preventative maintenance.
But you and Kenny are working on a pathway to A, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're also working on, when we do the budget this year, instead of a big lump sum of here's maintenance, by lift station, by facility, what we plan to spend, and have it very transparent.
Budget by line item.
That's right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Makes it easier to cut things too, if you.
I would say we're kind of in a transition.
Line item budget.
We have we're right in the middle. We have a lot of older stuff that we're bringing into more modern side, and then we have a lot of brand new stuff, especially in the Pelican Reserve side. All that stuff is brand spanking new. I mean, we got Cadillacs out there basically that they're gonna run for years and years and years, and we're probably never gonna have, not anytime soon. But we have some of our older stuff that we are trying to get up to a speed.
Okay.
And that's about it.
I'd like to go back to Chris. I got one I forgot, and I saw Flavia sitting back there. A month or so ago, we had Pond 87, and we kind of just let that drag. I'm all with the
83?
I'm sorry, 83. Sorry, 83. Sorry, 83. I don't want to sit there and hold on that. If we've got that firm, I think
Copeland?
PP wrote a very interesting article, and one of the things here about Copeland doing some work over there that was very honorable the way they did it, and had a change order, had work for which they could have rightly called for a change order and went in ahead and absorbed it because of a differing site condition, but they did it on their nickel. So that was impressive to, at least, they may not be engineers, but if they've got a solution, they've got a plan for 83, I don't want to sit here and be in the way of it. I'd say whatever you need to do to implement that, let's light the fire.
Yeah, it was basically a repair job, and
If we get the money, let's just do it.
sounds good.
Not stand in the way of it. Not stand in the way of it.
I'm freezing back here.
I'm what?
It's cold up here too.
So anyway, that was the deal, is to get that going again and get it done.
Yep.
Good.
That's good. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kenny.
you.
And again, welcome to your new position.
Thank you.
Okay, committee reports, we got the PPAC report.
Hi there, I'm Ron DePonte from the Pelican Reserve Advisory Committee. Hi. You've got a copy of our monthly report in your package. Be more than happy to answer any questions if I can.
I didn't have any. Kathy, did you
Nope.
have any? No, I didn't. Well, thank you for
Nothing?
your
All right.
patience.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, we're moving to consent agenda. Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to pull from the consent agenda?
No, Mr. McCullough already left.
Yeah, he
so-
needed to leave. He
So,
signaled
no.
to me. Anything anybody wants to, so I'll
Nope.
motion to
To
approve
accept.
the consent agenda items 5 A, B, C.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No, I said aye.
Okay.
I second.
I didn't hear, sorry, you said it, sorry, I
I'm
didn't hear.
I
All
know.
right. I'd like to take just a 5-minute break at this point, just 5 minutes.
But we're gonna skip, we already handled 6A,
Right.
I know.
so we're
But I
gonna jump through some of those.
actually really need a 5-minute break.
Don't disagree.